Lord of Mysteries. Survival from the Secret Doll Chapter 261 to 270. Chapter 261 2 meters Mitchell. Why is Eamon here? Did Mr. Flammel let him in? Could there be some kind of plan? Should we tell Mr. Pals? It wouldn't be good to mess up those big shots, plans. But he looks really weak, not sequence 2, just a sequence 4 level. Idiot, if he was sequence 2, Mr. Flammel would have come over and eaten him in one bite. Would Mr. Flammel dare to open Tingen? Would Amon's main body dare to come? A parasite with the ability to strip Hua Shang was scolding the occultist of the secret order in his mind as if he hated iron for not becoming steel. Oh, that's right. The topic ended, and the two parasites stared maliciously at Eamon, who was parasitizing a Nighthawk not far away. The era of being chased and intercepted by Eamon, hiding all day long, is over. Now is the era of Mr. Flammel manipulating the seer pathway. The blood debts of the past always need to be repaid with the sacrifice of a few almonds, right? The two parasites from the secret order had already begun to consider whether to slap that Amon's clone and rename him, Hua Shang. Don't mention it, but really, don't mention it. You guys, like attending an early meeting, buzzing in his head, the occultist of the secret order completely couldn't understand what these two parasites were saying. But realizing that these two parasites were shallowly parasitizing him, the occultist of the secret order tried to transfer his position through his marionette to get rid of this shallow parasitic state. Yes, he still had mystical items. In the sequence 4 state, in the shallow parasitic state, he was not without a chance. But to his surprise and despair, he couldn't sense his marionette, couldn't transfer his position through the spirit worm, let alone control his marionette and mobilize the mystical items on himself and his marionette. Not only that, but the spirit body threads vision, air bullet, changing his appearance, illusion, and a series of extraordinary abilities belonging to the seer pathway that underwent qualitative changes in sequence 4, all disappeared inexplicably. Wait, what's my name? The occultist of the secret order was stunned again. My name is Hua Shang. Giving this idiot another slap, the secret order parasite, who was stabilizing the system program output, looked together at the monster rushing towards them not far away. Under the gaze of Deputy Director Pearl, Dunn Smith, Leonard, Tang, and Pettigrew, the tall body, the occultist's main body, and the other marionettes all twitched and lay on the ground, looking like they had lost their ability to move and could only be slaughtered. After confirming that the demigod of Miskatonic had completely controlled the occultist of the secret order, Tang looked behind him. The huge monster, generated by Riel Bieber through the pollution of the black sun's light, was also sluggish in place at this moment. The monster's body was constantly collapsing, and one flower after another, one green leaf after another, constantly grew on its fat, huge body. Before long, the countless green leaves and flowers that burst out from its body all grew wildly, quickly covering the surface of this monster's body, which was full of thick pollution. These countless eyes, countless mouths, countless teeth, ears, and noses frantically impacted the things growing out of its body. It struggled to sprint forward, while the things growing out of its body took root in the ground, which had been turned into black soil by the sunlight, firmly controlling it in place. Why? What? For? For some reason, Klein's head buzzed as the monster approached. He seemed to hear the wailing of the huge monster and the questioning voice of Blood and Tears. That questioning voice seemed to carry extremely strong resentment, hatred, madness, and a deeply hidden, indelible attachment. It made a silent roar in Klein's direction, and each utterance symbolized an echo that seemed to pierce the spirit body. He couldn't believe it, because it wasn't any language he understood. Pettigrew, did you hear? Before Klein could say anything more, Klein, the lowest sequence present, suddenly fell backward. His last perspective was that countless flowers had completely bloomed on the huge monster in the distance. The monster stood still, as if it had become the nutrient for the flowers and plants that grew from its body, absorbing its nutrients. Dunn, Pettigrew, Leonard, and others around him all gathered around. Two figures floated out from the convulsing occultist's body. After that, everything in front of him turned into a blank black. Klein fainted. Hornassus, Phlegre, Hornassus, Phlegre. Vaguely, Klein heard a huge echo from a distant region, as if countless people were chanting together. That echo overlapped with the questioning voice of Blood and Tears that Klein had heard before he fainted. Why do you treat me like this? That overlapped with the sound of Hornassus Phlegre, and the magnificent sound made Klein feel a slight pain even in his coma. But soon, that magnificent, layered sound calmed down. A somewhat hoarse voice came into Klein's ears from a very distant place, seemingly separated by an unspeakable barrier. "Fool, be careful, Tingen ah." When Klein woke up groggily, the somewhat pungent but very familiar smell of disinfectant washed over his nasal cavity. Klein was in a daze for a moment, almost having the sense that he had just had a very long dream, that there was no transmigration, no Tingen city, that everything was just a dream. But soon, the person who had already noticed Klein waking up made a sound, pulling Klein back to reality. Awake, Klein twisted his somewhat stiff neck and saw Pettigrew and Leonard Mitchell, who had the temperament of a poet. "Where is this?" Pettigrew put away the booklet in his hand, and Leonard chuckled, pinching the monocle in his left eye socket. "Street, Peter's Hospital. Ah, thinking about it, it's quite interesting. I didn't expect that under the noses of 3 demigods, our seer gentlemen would actually be scared unconscious by that kind of monster." Leonard. Pettigrew looked at his teammate. Klein's somewhat swollen head was like a string that had snapped, and the memories before the coma seemed incoherent. Yes, it was when he saw that huge, terrifying monster that his brain went buzz, buzz, as if he had heard something he shouldn't have, seen something he shouldn't have. As the extraordinary with the lowest sequence among those present, Klein immediately fainted due to the self-protection of his spirituality. "How long have I been asleep?" Klein rubbed his brow, only to find a needle in his hand and several empty IV bottles beside him. The remaining ones were still continuously injecting fluids into his body through the tube and needle. It seemed to be some kind of nutrient solution. Klein was somewhat dazed. The predecessor transmigrator had really managed Tingen well. Many products from another world had appeared here, making Klein, as a transmigrator, sometimes feel as if he had never transmigrated at all. "Today is Sunday. You've been asleep for a day and 2 nights. It's already evening now." Klein looked at the window of the ward and saw the sky outside. The large clouds dyed a rosy red by the setting sun. Pettigrew put away his booklet and looked at Leonard, who was wearing a monocle. "Leonard, please take care of Klein. I'll go get the doctor." "No problem." Leonard smiled at Pettigrew and said. Pettigrew looked at Klein again and then left the ward. As the door closed, the ward was now left with the seemingly unreliable poet classmate, Leonard Mitchell, and Klein, who was lying on the bed feeling a bit sore all over. "Want some water?" Leonard asked. "Yes, thank you." As a patient, Klein quickly accepted his current situation. He sat up and took small sips of the water in the cup Leonard gave him, asking, "What about the Antigonus family notebook? Was it found in the end?" "Yes, the demigod from Miskatonic found it. The monster's final loss of control was due to the contamination hidden in the Antigonus family notebook. Now that thing is probably in some restricted area of Miskatonic, undergoing purification and investigation." Leonard shrugged. But unfortunately, the mastermind behind the notebook's disappearance doesn't seem to have done anything about it. After all, it wasn't just the demigods who were watching at the time, he was also watching. He, referring to the avatar of fallacy and loopholes, the angel in Tingen. "Yes," Leonard said, a smirk appearing on his lips. "But don't you think this is really interesting? Obviously that take action at once can easy solve of matter, that for what never no take action, only yes exist must degree exhibition appear he of strength. Why doesn't he ever intervene directly in matters that he could easily resolve with a single move, instead only demonstrating his power to a certain extent? And as an angel, a big shot at the top of the sequence potion pyramid in the god's pathway, he could have completely intervened directly when Welch and Naya took the notebook from the restricted area of the Tingen University library, preventing them from taking the notebook, not giving the secret order a chance, and not giving the mastermind an opportunity to profit. Even just reminding Tingen University, reminding Miskatonic and the Nighthawks, would have prevented so many problems. His completely laissez-faire attitude even led to us not even finding the shadow of that mastermind. Leonard's voice grew softer. "I always feel that this matter is not that simple. Is the theft of the Antigonus family notebook really only due to the existence of a third-party force? Klein, I think you don't understand that Tingen is called the City of Miracles not only because there are many creations in this city that transcend the present miracles." Klein furrowed his brow fiercely. In Leonard's words, he suddenly realized many problems that he had not noticed before. Just as Klein was about to ask about the reason why Tingen was called the City of Miracles, footsteps came from outside the door at an inopportune moment, just as Leonard was about to continue. Leonard immediately shut his mouth, returning to the smiling, somewhat unreliable expression he had just had. He mouthed to Klein, "Let's talk next time." With that, Leonard stood up, greeted the doctor and Pettigrew who were pushing open the ward door from outside, and walked out of the ward with his hands in his pockets. Klein had just woken up, and his mind was still a bit muddled. Only then did he realize what Leonard had just said, not trying to stop Welch and Naya from taking the Antigonus family notebook, deliberately indulging it. Why, what Leonard said made Klein feel even more incomprehensible, but on closer thought, what Leonard said actually had quite a few loopholes. Could this guy just be going crazy and trying to scare him? He remembers that the sequence 7 of the Captain's Pathway, the potion name is Nightmare. Is he trying to give him nightmares to promote potion digestion? The doctor quickly examined Klein's body. After confirming that he was only a little weak, Pettigrew thanked the doctor and handed him the lunch box on the bedside table. "You haven't eaten anything all day either, have something first." Klein chewed the food in his mouth in silence, his external expression as if he hadn't recovered from his previous state. "If you feel uncomfortable, you can stay here for the next few days." As the largest general hospital in Tingen Street, Peter's hospital also has strong security forces. It's unlikely that the mastermind will attack you here. Klein swallowed the food in his mouth and looked at Pettigrew. "However, if we follow Leonard's thinking, the only impact of this situation is that it led to my transmigration. Welch and Naya died, the original body also committed suicide, letting the Antigonus family notebook be taken away. The only benefit Klein could think of was this. Leading to a lucky one, who luckily escaped the inevitable resolution under the manipulation of the Antigonus notebook." But he didn't understand, and he also felt that what Leonard Mitchell said was very mysterious. Could transmigration really be encountered so casually? Klein was silent for a moment, then asked, "Pettigrew, Leonard just told me something." After that conversation, Klein felt that Leonard wasn't as simple as he seemed, and shouldn't just be trying to scare him. He didn't choose to hide it, and there was no reason to hide it. This guy quietly said such things to him when Pettigrew and the others weren't around. There must be something wrong. Either there's something wrong with him, or there's something wrong with his brain, like what people in Tingen like to get, persecutory delusion. When Leonard walked out of St. Peter's Hospital, he scanned his surroundings and easily spotted Azik Eggers, who had been sitting on a park bench opposite the hospital entrance for an unknown amount of time. Leonard looked over, and when he met the other's deep, dark black eyes that seemed to lack whites, he smiled and adjusted the monocle he wore in his left eye socket. Across the distance, seemingly not considering whether the other could see clearly, he said in a silent tone, full of mockery and deep, goading intent. "Isn't this the result you wanted to see?" Reminding Klein Moretti that the problems in Tingen were not just those on the surface. Seeming to have thought of something interesting, Leonard's lips curled slightly, revealing a playful expression full of flavor. Then, he lifted his leg and, under Azik Eggers' gaze, left St. Peter's Hospital. Tang sat on the bench, watching him leave. After an unknown period of time, the sky completely darkened, and the crimson moon gradually dominated the sky. The light of the mineral lamps dotted the corners of Tingen, and the surrounding crowd was still bustling. Births and deaths were constantly playing out within St. Peter's Hospital. For thousands of years, this city had been staging a vivid scroll of life, where countless lives were born and countless lives were sent away, generation after generation. At a certain moment when the bustling crowd walked past the park bench, the figure sitting on the park bench disappeared. In its place appeared a young man wearing a black silk top hat and a matching swallowtail coat. The young man stood up from the park bench, straightened his top hat, looked at the huge building complex in front of him, smiled, and took off his hat in salute. Then, the young man disappeared again with the movement of the crowd. This abnormality did not attract anyone's attention. Leonard, who boarded the public carriage to return to his residence, kept the smile on his lips even as he was surrounded by countless fresh lives. In his left eye's monocle, the young man wearing a black pointed soft hat comfortably adjusted his own monocle. "Ah, what my paranoid brother said, sometimes I have to admit, there are indeed things that are right, things that can be verified. If someone is trying to destroy the world, then that person may not necessarily be crazy. Even Alice de Tudor, his final ending can only be regretted. But if a person says he wants to create a world that is reasonably allocated, without conflict, without sadness, without pain, and make sufficient preparations and plans to welcome the end of the world. Heh, then that person must be out of his mind. Eamon admired the night view of Tingen, appreciating all aspects of this city. He saw the countless, seemingly boundless, illusory black threads floating above the heads of ordinary people and beyonders, watching those puppets who were disguised almost flawlessly but still could not escape being mere marionettes controlled by others. In this city, some people are happy, some are sad, some are wailing, some are in pain, some are joyful, some are trying their best to survive, some are high above, overlooking the world. They have always been just marionettes of others, following one command after another engraved in their spiritual bodies. But, this is really. Amon's lips slightly parted, revealing a rather satisfied smile, as if he had seen some strange creature and couldn't help but be attracted. Quite interesting. If we weren't on adjacent pathways, if you didn't have so many strange things on you, I really wouldn't mind learning from you. Tang Eggers. He gazed at the crimson moon overhead, smiled, and returned the fate of his parasitic object to the other. Only gave me such a parasitic object, this can't be easily killed. After all, I also want to see what's above the source castle. On the public carriage, the young man wearing a black silk top hat and a matching swallowtail coat stood there, looking at the red moon in the sky, seemingly also admiring the night view at this moment. Tingen University. In a sealed prison, a mysticism scholar of the secret order was guarded by two parasites. Mr. Zeratul, Mr. Eggers. The mysticism scholar of the secret order, upon hearing the name, Zeratul, suddenly opened his eyes in the lightless, dark world. Having been monitored by those parasitic beings of the seer pathway and imprisoned here, he had tried all his methods so far, even attempting the incomplete mythical creature form that he himself could not fully control, but the result was nothing. Just like what the parasite that initially parasitized him said, he was deprived of all extraordinary abilities. But in this world, is there really such a powerful beyander with the ability to deprive? Or is this the masterpiece of that? Nicholas Flamel. At this moment, this mysticism scholar of the secret order heard a name that was exceptionally familiar to him. He saw the door of the prison being opened, and an old man walked in. It was the leader of the secret order who sent him to Tingen, who, before his departure, guaranteed that regardless of whether the mission was completed or not, his life would be guaranteed, and he would be given the Sequence 3, Ancient Scholar Potion Formula and Extraordinary Characteristics. Mr. Zeratul. Before his surprise, astonishment, and joy could fully appear on his face, Zeratul in front of him slowly said, "Carlos, you did very well this time." The mysticism scholar of the secret order named Carlos, after adapting to the darkness, had already clearly seen Zeratul in front of him, and there was another person standing behind him. As a seer at the demigod level, Carlos clearly felt malice, danger, and something even more terrifying. This mysticism scholar of the secret order slowly moved his gaze away from Zeratul, who was smiling gently but seemed somewhat terrifying in this environment. He saw the spirit threads floating from Zeratul's body at this moment. Carlos saw the countless spirit threads, saw the spirit threads of Lord Zeratul, saw that they were not irregularly drifting towards the seemingly boundless dome, but many of those countless spirit threads were being held in the hands of the person behind him. Carlos widened his eyes in astonishment. Marionette. At this moment, Carlos finally saw the full appearance of the young man who walked into the prison behind Zeratul. It was the ritualistic sorcerer of Khoi University he had tried to manipulate before, a beyander of the same pathway, standing next to the deputy director of the Tingen University Security Department. That young man was smiling at him at this moment. "You did very well, but I don't know, should I call you Carlos, or Basil? Jordan, Ashley, Mills, the others are other names fabricated by this sorcerer using the abilities of the Faceless." The young man's praise overlapped with Zeratul's praise. Carlos was completely dumbfounded. When he saw Lord Zeratul still wearing the smile he saw every day, he understood. What didn't he understand at this moment? Why were the actions of the Mystery Order's higher-ups unified? Why did the Mystery Order try to break into Tingen City, where Nicholas Flamel was located? Why did they need the Antigonus family's notebook? Naturally, everything was under the control of the young man in front of him, in Tingen University, in Miskatonic, in Nicholas Flamel. Mystic, servant, his body floated upwards involuntarily, his eyes bulging, he was struggling. He seemed to have regained the power of a sorcerer. He was trying to display an incomplete mythical creature form. "You're right, so according to my previous promise, I will grant you the Sequence 3, Scholar of Antiquities, bestowed power." This sorcerer of the Mystery Order was suspended in the prison, his body swaying in the windless room. Soon, Carlos, the sorcerer suspended in midair, revealed a smile identical to Zaratu's and Tang Yi's. "Welcome to the fold." "My pleasure, Mr. Eggers." The sorcerer, who was just terrified and ferocious, said to Tang with a smile. "We will all dedicate everything for the established future, for destiny." Dedicate everything. The two parasites outside the door had already run away. Dirty stuff, Why are you running? I won't hang you up as secret puppets." "That's a problem for Nicholas to consider." A faint voice came from behind, and the two parasites burst into tears. "Woo, Mr. Flammel, Mr. Pales, save us, It's really strange, Mr. Eggers, please don't make trouble, okay? Don't sacrifice them to the heavens, okay, Street, Peter's Hospital. Klein lay on the bed, thinking about what Pedigree had said. God has things God should do, and humans have things humans should do. Pedigree said something that seemed right but wasn't quite right in response to Klein's doubts. He turned his head to look at the scarlet moon that was gradually rising outside the window. The scarlet moonlight shone through the window into the ward, which was particularly bright because of the mineral lamp. "What I believe in is the goddess, so I cannot answer what that person thinks about the disappearance of the notebook, Klein. But as far as I know, even within the Night Church, those archbishops, popes, and deacons have rarely received revelations from the goddess now. The 7 Orthodox God churches are all like this, and that person almost only responds to ritual magic and casts his gaze in Tingen City. He also rarely shows up in front of everyone. The world is undergoing tremendous changes, and I have a hunch that this may be closely related to each of us." Changes that are closely related to each of us, indeed. What Leonard said sounds quite reasonable at first, but according to the mystical knowledge I have learned now, the angel in Tingen City, if he does not have corresponding extraordinary abilities, should not be able to grasp every area and every change in real time. For Klein, who didn't understand the power, authority, and abilities of a demigod or angel in the seer pathway, the fact that the angel in Tingen City didn't pay attention or was interfered with by high-level forces, causing him to not discover the problem immediately, was completely different from directly letting it go. Of course, directly letting it go may also be because that person doesn't have the interest to care. God has things God should do, and humans have things humans should do. Klein repeated what Pedigree said in his heart once again. He felt that Pedigree's words were much more trustworthy than Leonard, who seemed unreliable and spoke nonsense. Even if they really noticed, if it doesn't rise to that person's level, maybe it's really just a simple matter of a few people dying. This was not the 21st century he was in. Even if the predecessor Transcender transformed Tingen City into a place somewhat similar to the era before he transmigrated, for those big shots with extraordinary powers, the class difference brought about by extraordinary abilities and divinity was probably even more serious than Klein thought. The death of a few people, for those high-ranking people, those gods high above, may just be a matter of crushing a few ants. Who would think about what the ants they ignore and die under their feet are thinking? Thinking too much is useless. Klein, who had been sleeping for a day and 2 nights, thought about the tarot gathering that was about to be held above the gray fog tomorrow, and his eyelids drooped involuntarily. Take one step and see what happens. The mystery of his transmigration, the predecessor Transcender in Tingen City whose name he still doesn't know, Miskatonic University, angels, the mastermind behind the notebook disappearance case. With these many questions in his heart, Klein gradually fell into a dream. The inpatient department of St. Peter's Hospital became very quiet after nightfall. The brightness of the mineral lamps in the corridor was dimmed, and outside the window at the end, the scarlet moonlight that penetrated through the window and into the inpatient department was still pure and bright. In a daze, Klein didn't know why he heard a sound of heavy objects being dragged, coming from the corridor outside the ward door. He half opened his eyes in a daze. After being awakened, he subconsciously made a mistake and looked towards the observation window at the ward door with his eyes half open. There seemed to be someone in the corridor, many people, some blurry shadows that couldn't see their faces passing by the observation window. It seems that many people are walking in the corridor at this hour. Is this the nighttime activity of patients at St. Peter's Hospital? Klein yawned. He didn't realize at all that the heads of those people seemed to be higher than the position of the observation window, higher than where normal people's heads should be. He also didn't realize that the bodies of those shadows didn't rise and fall, they were simply moving horizontally. It's impossible that all the patients in the inpatient department are forsaken half-giants, right? In a daze, Klein once again fell into a baby-like sleep. The night passed without dreams, and when Klein woke up the next day, the sun was already high in the sky. As if to give Klein ample time to rest, there were no visits from Nighthawk colleagues or consolations from relatives and friends that morning. For the entire Monday morning, Klein stayed in his hospital room, leisurely flipping through the books related to ritualistic magic that old Neil had left behind. Breakfast and lunch were delivered by the nurses. For the Nighthawks, Punishers, and MI9 investigators, the extraordinary individuals of Tingen City, St. Peter's Hospital offered a certain degree of preferential treatment to those with official or unofficial affiliations, and their hospital rooms were also different from ordinary ones. This was perhaps also in consideration of the inherent dangers of being extraordinary. Time passed quickly, and it was nearing 3 in the afternoon. After checking the room for any signs of surveillance, Klein rotated a Loen gold coin at the knuckles of his left hand. Then, suddenly, the coin flew into the air, fell again, and was caught by Klein. Looking at the front and back of the coin, and confirming that there shouldn't be anyone monitoring him, Klein entered the washroom, took 4 steps counterclockwise, and recited the 4-stanza honorific name, preparing to ascend above the gray fog and convene a gathering. After a period of frenzied, chaotic whispers that seemed capable of tearing apart the soul, Klein saw the seemingly eternal gray-white fog and a magnificent palace. Inside the grand palace, a bronze-long table, modeled and ancient, exuded a certain eternal aura. He sat in the high-backed chair belonging to the Fool, reaching out, experiencing a moment of daze and trance. He seemed to have forgotten something very important. Hornassus, be careful of Tingen. Flegre. Hornassus, be careful of Ting. Hornassus. Flegre. Those seemed to be the strange whispers he heard when passing through the gray fog to reach the realm above. But there was something else. Klein's expression was blank for a moment, and in an instant, he forgot that he seemed to have forgotten something important. Transparent worm-like creatures with 12 segments crawled out of Klein's spiritual body and merged into the surrounding gray fog. These were the time worms that had stowed away this time. These time worms merged into the surrounding gray fog, fusing with the core of this eternal, misty domain above the gray fog. They quietly watched the mystical gathering above the gray fog, the towering palace, and the 2 opposing tarot gatherings, split and separated by the water mirror-like surface at the heart of the magnificent palace. At the head of the bronze-long table in the mirror, Klein shook his head, feeling that he had indeed slept long enough these past few days. He woke himself up, ignored the strange changes in the surrounding gray fog just now, and activated the surrounding crimson stars, preparing to pull Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man up to the gray fog. This gathering must be sped up a bit. It wouldn't be a big problem for Klein to stay in the washroom for a while. After all, extraordinary individuals weren't Superman. As a patient who had just woken up from a coma and still needed an IV drip for his digestive system, constipation, well, wasn't impossible. But if it took too long, the nurse who came to check on Klein's health and safety might call someone to break down the washroom door. At that time, he would be in big trouble. The crimson stars were activated, and 2 figures appeared in this magnificent ancient palace. Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. Good afternoon, Mr. Hanged Man. The cheerful atmosphere of the blonde girl made Klein's mood equally pleasant. At the same time, Klein saw the glittering stars behind Miss Justice's chair moving rapidly, forming an unreal constellation that didn't belong to reality. That was the symbol of the dragon, in the mystical sense. Klein immediately remembered what he had read in the mystical books before. The spectator pathway can also be called the dragon pathway. It is the leader of the mind, the master of the collective unconscious sea. The ancient dragons that exist in the current century are all extraordinary beings at the demigod level, all possessing terrifying power and chilling psychological manipulation abilities. It seems that Miss Justice has successfully advanced to sequence 9 spectator with the recipe provided by Mr. Hanged Man. Klein pondered for a moment, thinking about the situation at St. Peter's Hospital. The acting method is semi-public knowledge in Tingen, so St. Peter's Hospital should attract quite a few spectators, extraordinary individuals of the physician pathway, within Tingen City. After all, sequence 7 of the spectator pathway is called a psychological counselor, or, in ancient times, a psychoanalyst. Such a group, in Tingen City, the easiest and most suitable place for them to act is the psychiatric department within St. Peter's Hospital. Judging from the original body's memories, although the extraordinary is also semi-public knowledge in Tingen City, truly stepping into the mystical circle and becoming an extraordinary individual is the key. On the surface, St. Peter's Hospital doesn't have much connection between the treatment of various diseases and extraordinary powers, but as the largest hospital in the City of Miracles, it's obviously impossible for there to be no extraordinary individuals here. Klein thought of Mrs. Allison, the original body's mother, a lady who had been bedridden for many years. Well, I can ask old Neil later, if I can get an extraordinary individual to treat Mom, then Mom's health should soon return to normal. Ordinary people have ordinary methods of treating diseases, and extraordinary individuals have extraordinary methods of treating diseases. Of course, one of the main reasons why the original body and his family didn't choose this was because hiring an extraordinary individual for treatment required quite a bit of expense. I wonder if it can be covered by medical insurance, reimbursing part of it. Well, as a member of the Nighthawks, seeking some family benefits is normal, right? Amidst the chaotic thoughts, Klein once again looked at Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man. Madam, sir, have you found any of Russell's diaries? In the magnificent palace, Hanged Man, Alger and Justice, Audrey bowed to the fool, sitting at the head of the bronze long table, expressing their respect. They only heard the fool, sitting at the head of the table ask, Madam, sir, I wonder, have you found any of Emperor Russell's diaries from his later years? Upon hearing this, Miss Audrey, who had become a spectator, opened her glittering eyes, which seemed to shimmer with jewel-like brilliance, and glanced at Hanged Man, Alger across from her with a scrutinizing gaze. She gently shook her head at Fang, and said respectfully, No, Mr. Error. I think you are very clear that what you need, the diaries of Emperor Rosal in his later years, are either in a state of disappearance, or they have fallen into the hands of the Church and major secret organizations. Without the assistance of official extraordinary high-level and secret organization high-level, it is very difficult for us to obtain things of this level. Mr. Hanged Man is much more respectful than before. Justice, Miss Audrey keenly noticed this. Well, Emperor Rosal's diaries in his later years. Indeed, Mr. Error said that these diaries written by Emperor Rosal have shown a certain degree of activation. They are living things. Audrey searched for Emperor Rosal's diary in her family's vault, but unfortunately, the diaries in the family's vault are all from Emperor Rosal's early years, and most of them are copies, which are of no value to Mr. Error. Yes, Mr. Error looked at Hanged Man, Alger with a smile, his tone slightly lowered. So, this is a rather long-term task with a risk factor that I cannot guarantee. Finding any page from Emperor Rosal's later years, I will give you a very rich reward. He glanced at Hanged Man, Alger, and then swept over Justice, Audrey, sitting leisurely and comfortably in the wide high-backed chair, not annoyed by the lack of Emperor Rosal's late diaries. You can begin. Audrey and Alger had become accustomed to Mr. Error's attitude. For such a great existence, the things they were talking about really couldn't attract the other party's attention. But such a great existence itself may represent an opportunity. I really hope Mr. Error can give me more opportunities to try. Justice, Miss Audrey muttered to herself, well, if I find Emperor Rosal's late diary, I wonder if I can ask Mr. Error to give me the next potion formula and materials for the spectator pathway. This is an opportunity. Hanged Man, Alger was very clear about this. He looked at Miss Justice, opposite him. Miss Justice thought for a moment and put forward her own questions and transaction content. After Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man materialized the Emperor Rosal's diaries they remembered in the mysterious space above the gray fog, Klein's mind moved, and the parchments with crooked writing, purely based on memory, flashed into his hands. Glancing over them, Klein roughly browsed through the diaries. He found that in the diaries remembered by Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man, the Chinese language order was reversed to some extent, and there were also omissions and typos in the content. However, experiments have proved that a certain degree of order errors and typos will not affect the reading of Chinese. If it wasn't after I knew that Emperor Rosal had left notes, either accepting protection at 32 Red Rose Street, or running around with pedigree, I could have gone to Tingen University Library to see if there were any collections of Emperor Rosal's diary copies, without so much trouble. After all, there are not a few scholars studying Rosal studies, in Tingen City. The original owner, who liked to study history, had borrowed Rosal Emperor's novels and essays from the library of Tingen University. Ah, Of course, for this kind of diary that is only open to specific people and is useful enough, maybe Miskatonic University also has people monitoring it. After all, in the Tingen University notebook theft case, Tingen University also lost several Emperor Rosel's notebooks that were said to have some problems. Although Klein had seen the lost notebook in the ritual magic created by Pedigree, he did not notice the problem. Klein looked at the diaries of Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man in his hand and began to quickly read the contents. August 31st, I arrived in Tingen City, if that Spirit World Express didn't plagiarize the Hogwarts Express, I, Huang Dao, will definitely wash my hair upside down. Fortunately, I ran fast. The bunch of silly birds from the artisan church should still be guarding the door of my house now, right? Well, both my cheap parents are believers of the artisan, and I am just a weak, pitiful, and helpless Sequence 9, an ordinary scholar, just recalling the physics and chemistry knowledge that I learned in high school and that Miskatonic University has played with so much. Sure enough, the artisan god church is just like I thought, so weak, too weak, not on the same level as Miskatonic University at all. September 1st, Miskatonic University is really real. Haha, sure enough, I, Huang Dao, have indeed found the organization. While this university hasn't started yet, I've been at Miskatonic, I'll call it Miskatonic for short from now on. I flipped through the history of this university in the library of Miskatonic. Its traceable historical period is at the end of the Fourth Epoch and the beginning of the Fifth Epoch, that is to say, the Transcender predecessor is at least more than 1,300 years ago. I don't know if the Transcender predecessor is still alive. In this world, how many people are like me, inexplicably transcended to this world? If he, or she is still alive, no matter if his previous life was Asian, Caucasian, or black, I think, as long as he doesn't have malice towards me, I will definitely drink with him. Of course, those who are living a good life can be excluded. September 2nd, I met the president of Miskatonic University at the freshman ceremony. His name is Nicholas Flamel. Nicholas Flamel. Nicholas Flamel. Klein's seer intuition moved, and he recalled the source of this name. In the Harry Potter and other Western magic story novels, this name also appears. Transcender predecessor. He was a little uncertain. After all, relying on the name alone, it is actually difficult to have discernment under the cultural influence of both Emperor Rosal and the Transcender predecessor. Although Emperor Rosal, who has not yet studied at Miskatonic, should not have such a strong plagiarism, borrowing cultural foundation and cheekiness. Well, not sure, let's take another look. Klein turned to the next page, but the content on the upper and lower pages was in a state of obvious separation. And both of these pages were provided by Miss Justice. However, for people who don't understand Chinese, things without logic, unless there are things like page numbers that can be understood to provide assistance, otherwise, in this era when Emperor Rosal's diary is frantically copied, it is very difficult to collect consecutive notes from the preceding and following pages. Klein felt a little regretful. It was as if his favorite novel had suddenly stopped updating. Suppressing that slightly disappointed emotion, Klein continued to read on. For him, Emperor Rosal, as a transmigrator who had also been to Tingen, should have quite a few notes and records about the situation of MI9. Moreover, Klein himself was in Tingen, and there were many opportunities to inquire about MI9's news, so he was not in a hurry to get to know that fellow townsman who had transmigrated even earlier than Emperor Rosal. March 7th, the abnormal weather of the raging sea interrupted my fantasy of going to the southern continent to search for the relics and treasures of ancient tribes. This is said to be the weather changes in marine environment of the place where the god of death fell in the late Fourth Epoch. It simply exceeded my imagination of the difficulty of sailing at sea. Raging sea, the place where the god of death fell. Klein's heart suddenly skipped a beat when he saw these two names. The god of death was the god worshipped by the Balam Empire in the southern continent during the Fourth Epoch. In the current Fifth Epoch, the name of this god is only occasionally mentioned in Fourth Epoch history books. And nowadays, in the northern continent where various countries stand, it is also rare to see the shadows of people from the southern continent. Maritime trade and sea routes between the north and south continents are isolated by the turbulent sea between the north and south continents, which is prone to changeable weather and sudden marine conditions. Many people who were once from the southern continent have also become more and more like the people of the northern continent under the assimilation of generations, and it is difficult to distinguish people of southern continent descent from the natives of the northern continent by appearance alone. Emperor Rosal once tried to go to the southern continent across the raging sea, the country once ruled by the god of death. Did the god of death die in the raging sea at the end of the distant Fourth Epoch? This is content that many history books have not written about. Klein only mentioned the speculation that the fall of the god of death and the birth of the raging sea were related in some of his mentor, Mr. Azik Eggers' papers. The research on the ancient history of the Fourth Epoch at Khoi University has always focused on the humanities, geography, and events of the North and South continents. Klein recalled for a moment and found that most of the knowledge of the original owner about the Fourth Epoch, that is, the Age of Gods, was also deliberately exaggerated and hidden in the Church's classics, and rarely mentioned the historical situation of extraordinary people in mysticism. Well, if I have time later, I can go to the library of Khoi University to find relevant information as a Nighthawk. The collection of books in the Khoi University library also has parts that are not open to the public. That part is not a forbidden book in the restricted area, but because it involves knowledge of mysticism and is operable, those books will only be provided to officials or extraordinary people who have obtained a borrowing card from the Khoi University library. Klein continued to read on. My ship and I sailed in the raging sea for a whole half-month, but this place is either sea or rain. Ah, the raging sea is indeed the raging sea. Even a demigod on the apprentice pathway cannot enter the southern continent through spirit world traversal. This is really strange. It stands to reason that although the spirit world overlaps with the real world, it is also higher than the real world to a certain extent. Even apprentices cannot enter the southern continent. Is the spirit world on the southern continent in a state of separation? Like the legendary eastern continent, the legendary land abandoned by God. Tisk, apprentices who are good at space flashing can't enter the southern continent, and there are surprisingly few southern continent people in the northern continent. I even suspect that the southern continent is doing something like closing the country. The extraordinary people there used some method I don't know to make their former god of death stir up a bloody storm in the raging sea, blocking all those who approach and sealing the spirit world or something, right? March 9th, I don't know if I saw it wrong, but there's something flying in the sky above the raging sea, some kind of monster that looks like a spaceship that I've only seen in science fiction novels. Ha ha ha, I was amused by my own thoughts. Where did spaceships come from in this era? But that monster ran away quickly. The clouds are too thick, it's all rain and waves, and sea monsters. Tisk tisk, the raging sea is indeed a place that makes many people return in defeat, but I know that I will conquer this place sooner or later. What's this called? This is called conquering the stars and the sea. This is a man's romance. Well, I have to go back to Intis. This sea trip has indeed been a bit long, and if the problem of the raging sea is not resolved, even the most advanced battleships of Intis cannot pass through this obviously abnormal sea, suspected to be from the remaining power of the god of death, to reach the southern continent. Perhaps, I can ask Zeratul. After all, as a seer and having lived long enough, he should know something. March 12th, Zeratul came to me. He told me that the problem of the raging sea is not only because the god of death fell there, but also. The page is missing. Klein felt a little stifled. He looked at the few pages of parchment in front of him speechlessly. Emperor, please explain it more clearly. What else is there besides the fall of the god of death? It makes me, a person who is catching up on updates 100 years later, very uncomfortable, you know. Klein suddenly had the urge to try to communicate with Emperor Rosal and pull him out to ask what happened next. Good news, I learned a lot. Bad news, it seems like I don't know anything. The raging sea is the ocean that blocks the north and south continents, and even apprentices who have mastered space and have a certain ability to traverse the spirit world cannot enter that ocean and the entire southern continent. It is suspected that the spirit world is sealed off. Who can directly seal off the entire spirit world of the southern continent? The god of death they worship. He is not dead, no, undead. Klein's mystical knowledge is not enough to support him in figuring out the problem, which involves high-level things. Also, Emperor Rosal mentioned an extraordinary person named Zeratul in his diary. He knows the problem of the raging sea. Klein thought for a while and frowned. He remembered seeing this name somewhere before. I remember that there was also a Zeratul family among the nobles of the Solomon Empire in the Fourth Epoch. This was a great noble family of comparable status to the Antigonus family, and Cheritu was a diviner. Diviner, Klein is a diviner, the Antigonus family controls the diviner pathway, the secret order seeks the notes of the Antigonus family, and they also control the diviner pathway. Miskatonic, on the other hand, controls the complete sequence of the diviner and thief pathways. A strange sense of awkwardness and destiny made Klein unable to help but mutter, was he poking a hornet's nest of diviners? How come in these 2 weeks after his transmigration, there are shadows of diviners everywhere? The secret order is, the Antigonus family is, and even Rosal the Great's diary has started to be filled with diviners. And next, when Klein proposed that the reward for helping Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man answer the content of the acting method was some information about the secret order, Klein felt an even more scalp-tingling sense of destiny, as if it were predetermined. Mr. Hanged Man said, "The leader of the secret order is called Cheritu. The leader of the secret order, that angel, is called Ra, too." Klein suddenly felt a sense of suffocation as if he was surrounded by diviners. He was a little PTSD about diviners. How come there are diviners everywhere? Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man looked at each other, their expressions appearing a little strange in a place Klein couldn't see. "Mr. Fool, you're just overthinking it. How can there be so many diviners in this world?" Under the active attitude of Miss Justice, Audrey, who had already become a spectator, she exchanged a lot of basic occult knowledge and information with Mr. Hanged Man, Alger, using gold pounds as remuneration. As a member of the Loen nobility, the daughter of Earl Hall, Audrey felt that at least on the surface, she would not be biased and join any occult, official or non-official organization, nor did she intend to expose the fact that she had become a spectator. After all, this would worry Mom and Dad, but Audrey had an inexplicable thirst for the extraordinary world, which materialized after coming into contact with Mr. Error, this great existence. If you want to specifically learn those occult knowledge, I can provide some books that have been compiled into volumes for reference, to help you further master and understand the current world. Speaking of this, Mr. Hanged Man, Alger lowered his head, imperceptibly glancing at the figure of Mr. Nicola Flamel, Error, sitting at the head of the table. The other party did not stop him. Miskatonic University's books. Miss Justice, Audrey asked curiously. Yes, Mr. Hanged Man, Alger retracted his gaze, nodded and said, nowadays, it is almost a common decision within the major orthodox churches to use Miskatonic University's books for teaching new extraordinary individuals who have just joined them, or extraordinary individuals who need enlightenment and further study. You should know Tingen City, right? You should know the 2 universities in Tingen City, one called Tingen University, and one called Khoi University, right? Mr. Hanged Man, Alger asked Miss Justice, Audrey. Yes, I know, Audrey nodded. She smiled slightly. Actually, if it weren't for my mom and dad's opposition, I think I would have aimed to enter Tingen University. Speaking of this, Audrey seemed to realize that her mom and dad's attitude towards her wanting to go to Tingen University was strange. As Audrey, who had already become a spectator, couldn't help but ask, Mr. Hanged Man, is there any problem with this? According to what Mr. Hanged Man said, Audrey had a vague guess. Mr. Hanged Man, Alger shook his head, your father and mother's decision was not a problem, it's just that they probably didn't tell you the specific reason. These 2 universities are located in Tingen City of the Loen Kingdom. I mentioned before that Miskatonic University is a semi-official secret organization. This university has a close connection with Tingen City, and in Tingen City, many things related to mysticism are actually not that secretive, even ordinary people can come into contact with them. Mr. Hanged Man further explained, among the countries of the northern continent, Tingen University is a top university in the ordinary people's world. In most cases, it cultivates ordinary people without obvious extraordinary powers, such as scientists, writers, historians, mathematicians, and so on. Khoi University, on the other hand, is a university that trains official extraordinary individuals of major churches, major secret organizations, and wild extraordinary individuals. One is for ordinary people, and one is for extraordinary people. Miss Justice, Audrey thought for a while, and realized something, so, some of the freshmen of Miskatonic University are selected at Tingen University. The concentration of extraordinary power in Tingen City is much higher than in Backland, and ordinary people there can also come into contact with the extraordinary, which means that everyone who enters Tingen University has the opportunity to become an extraordinary. And Tingen University and Khoi University are subordinate organizations of Miskatonic University. Mr. Hanged Man, Alger nodded, and he looked at Mr. Error, at the head of the mottled bronze long table without leaving a trace, and seeing that the other party still had no intention of stopping him, he continued to briefly describe the relationship between Tingen City, Miskatonic University, and the major secret organizations and orthodox churches that he had specifically learned about within the Storm Church recently. In short, for noble families in the Loen kingdom who have a clear understanding of allegiance and are loyal to the Augustus family, in the case of not allowing their children to become extraordinary, trying to avoid letting their children go to Tingen can be regarded as a common and spoken rule among these noble families. After all, becoming an extraordinary person indicates the existence of various risks. The more you say that, the more I want to go and see. Miss Justice muttered in her heart, and then, her bright eyes looked at Mr. Hanged Man, and asked, Mr. Hanged Man, have you been to Miskatonic University? What kind of place is it? Mr. Hanged Man, Alger just shook his head. I'm sorry, I haven't been there. However, perhaps there will be a chance. Mr. Hanged Man, Alger and Miss Justice, Audrey heard the chuckle of Mr. Error, at the head of the bronze long table at this time. After hearing Mr. Hanged Man's ghost story-like answer, Klein's somewhat stiff body gradually relaxed as his emotions recovered, not giving Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man the impression that, Mr. Fool, you seem to have shivered a bit. The leader of the secret order is actually Zeratul, and he even had contact with Emperor Rosal. Klein had a sense of déjà vu, like, why is this world so small? This feeling of predetermined fate gave him, someone who didn't quite believe in fate, the illusion that all of this seems to be arranged. Of course, that should be impossible. Klein composed himself, not believing that a small figure like him would be arranged by someone for some inexplicable reason. After all, he was just an ordinary Sequence 9, except for the slightly special mysterious space above this strange gray fog. Only his identity as a transmigrator was conspicuous enough. And Klein couldn't possibly reveal his identity as a transmigrator. Even now, in Tingen, this city of miracles, he wouldn't rashly expose his existence to that transmigrator senior who was confirmed to be the founder, or partner, of Miskatonic University. Really, it's too coincidental. A coincidence like fate, and this kind of fate-like coincidence could actually be explained to some extent in Klein's knowledge of mysticism. Extraordinary characteristic aggregation law, as one of the three basic laws of the mystical world, extraordinary characteristic conservation, extraordinary characteristic non-extinction, and extraordinary characteristic aggregation. Klein had already learned about these when studying with old Neil at 32 Red Rose Street, the Nighthawk's office building. The current situation does indeed fit the characteristics of extraordinary characteristic aggregation, but I'm just a Sequence 9, how could I produce such a large aggregation effect? Klein didn't understand, but he couldn't explain the frequent, incidents that had occurred since his transmigration. He could only attribute it to his bad luck and the mastermind behind the notebook disappearance case in Tingen City. Klein didn't listen carefully to the subsequent conversation between Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man, but at the end of this gathering, Klein brought up some of his previous guesses and ideas from when he was learning ritualistic magic with old Neil. I have something, Klein said, maintaining his posture, gently tapping the table with his knuckles, attracting the attention of Mr. Hanged Man and Miss Justice. This requires your cooperation. I said before that I would try to allow you to take leave in advance, so you don't have to worry about being in an inappropriate place on Monday afternoon. Let's end here for today. As you will, Mr. Error. Justice Audrey and Hanged Man Alger stood up, bowed, and saluted Mr. Error at the head of the bronze long table. When the crimson stars returned to dimness, and the unchanging gray fog became quiet once again, Mr. Error straightened his black silk top hat and slowly took out several translucent, worm-like creatures from his tailcoat pocket. They floated from Mr. Error's hand, as if possessing their own spirituality, and burrowed into the two figures sitting in the positions of Justice and Hanged Man, who had appeared at some unknown time. They recombined with the two avatars of Mr. Error, formed from time worms. The expressions of those two avatars of Mr. Error began to gradually become more vivid and lifelike, as if infused with their own souls. These reflections of Justice and Hanged Man, derived from Error and Glitch, became increasingly agile. They sat in their positions, seemingly transforming into the real Hanged Man, transforming into the real Justice. They whispered prayers. The fool who does not belong to this era. The mysterious ruler above the gray fog. The king of yellow and black who wields good fortune. I beseech your help. I beseech your favor. I beseech you, grant me a good dream. Layers upon layers of prayers echoed across the vast and boundless gray fog. Mr. Error sat at the head of the bronze long table, slowly closing his eyes, seemingly falling into slumber amidst the illusory and layered prayers. On either side of the bronze long table, in addition to Hanged Man, Justice, Chariot, and Fool, two more figures appeared once again. They each occupied two positions on either side of the bronze long table, saluting and greeting the Tarot Club members beside them. Finally, these two newly joined members saluted Mr. Error at the head of the bronze long table. "Good afternoon, Mr. Error." Real world. After waking up, Klein walked out of the washroom. Although he had tried to compress the time above the gray fog as much as possible, the impact of this gathering above the gray fog was quite strong for Klein, which led to him spending a bit too much time in the washroom in the real world. Opening the door to the washroom, Klein glanced at his hospital room. Good, he hadn't attracted the nurse's attention. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then lay back down on the bed, waiting for Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man to perform the ritual, to see if he could use the three-part honorific name to resonate with the mysterious space above the gray fog. This was to test a certain mechanism of the mysterious space above the gray fog. This was very likely the root cause of his transmigration, and the sooner he understood it, the sooner he could go home. Since the gray fog can pull in Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man, then it, that is, what is called the level of existence, should be quite high. Existing in the real world, yet transcending the real world, a being worthy of being called a miracle. While anxiously waiting for the results of this attempt, Klein's attention involuntarily turned to another aspect. However, the leader of the secret order is actually called Zeratul. The leader of the secret order is called Zeratul, a great noble from the Solomon Empire during the Fourth Epoch. According to Klein's knowledge of the Fourth Epoch, the Zeratul family was on par with the Antigonus family at that time, both being great nobles of the Solomon Empire, and both mastering the seer pathway. And now, that descendant of the Fourth Epoch great noble is also investigating the notebook of the Antigonus family's descendant, who was also a noble of the Solomon Empire. At the same time, that leader of the secret order is suspected to have had contact with Emperor Rosal. No, it's also possible that the Zeratul mentioned by the Emperor in his diary is just someone from the Zeratul family, and doesn't specifically refer to that angel of the secret order. Having the surname Zeratul and being a seer doesn't necessarily mean they are the leader of the secret order. There are quite a few people with the same surname, and the Zeratul family itself controls the seer pathway. Without necessary supplementary conditions, the equation cannot be established. But regardless of whether the Zeratul the Emperor knew was that angel of the secret order and Antigonus are clearly both high-ranking individuals who control the seer pathway. As expected, when gods fight, mortals suffer. As for Hornassus, Phlegre, and that ancient god from the Second Epoch, what relationship does the destruction demonic wolf Phlegre have? Klein recalled a small portion of the Antigonus family's notes that he and Welch had deciphered, which mentioned the existence of a kingdom called the Night Country, above the Hornassus Mountains. The terrifying and bizarre whispers that seers hear during advancement may come from the Hornassus Mountains, from a high-ranking individual of the seer pathway existing on the Hornassus Mountains. Klein recalled old Neil's interpretation of Hornassus, Phlegre, and he took a light breath. The concentration of seers in Tingen City recently is really a bit excessive. Not long after the gathering ended, Pettigrew came to St. Peter's Hospital to visit him. I brought some notes from that insane member of the secret order. I thought you might be interested. Consider it a way to pass the time, Pettigrew said, but you should be mentally prepared. Although there's nothing wrong with these notes themselves, some of the content, well, some things, look quite chilling. Notes that are a bit chilling to look at. Klein's heart stirred. Pettigrew took out some obviously copied notes from the insane secret order member from the document bag. The copies were neatly stacked together, looking like a thick pile, not something one person could write in a short amount of time. Inside, there are not only the notes of that insane secret order member, but also a large number of strange drawings. Drawings? Pettigrew nodded. Yes, investigators from Miskatonic have identified them. Although the drawings don't contain extraordinary power, they have quite the atmosphere of a horror story. Drawings with the atmosphere of a horror story. Klein thought of some novels he had read before his transmigration. Novels had illustrations to help readers better understand the content. Do these drawings serve a similar purpose? Klein took the notes Pettigrew gave him and began to read the notes of that insane secret order member. On the first page, Klein saw the following written in the notes. This is the day I become a magician. I have prepared the sequence 7 potion formula and the main ingredients. Well, next, I can concoct the potion and prepare to advance to sequence 7, magician, of the seer pathway. Those bigwigs in the secret order told me that there won't be too many problems during the advancement process of sequence 9, sequence 8, and sequence 7. Low sequence potions like these don't require rituals. As long as the potion is concocted in the correct way, there won't be any problems. Advancing to sequence 7 will only slightly intensify the whispers you hear compared to advancing to sequence 8. As long as you ignore those things, for a clown, like me, with the premise of using the acting method to digest the potion, sequence 7 won't be dangerous. Quote, quote, I heard that voice again during the advancement process, Hornassus, Phlegre. What does this mean? What exists on the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains? I asked others before, but they didn't seem to know much either. Perhaps, I will only know when I become a marionettist, a trickmaster. However, there is still one thing I am not very clear about. During the process of advancing to magician, I vaguely saw a scene. But I can't remember it clearly. I asked my guide, and my guide told me that everything seen and heard during the advancement process must never be recalled or thought about again. This is the case before I advance to sequence 4 and become a trickmaster. The sequence 4 potion name of the seer pathway is Trickmaster. Klein already knew this when he encountered the Trickmaster from the secret order. He continued to read down. But, after I became a magician, I dreamed of that scene that I should have forgotten. Seeing this, Klein prepared to turn to the next page. Pettigrew stopped him for a moment. Be mentally prepared first. Below is a drawing made with ritual magic by that insane magician. Although it doesn't have the mental pollution of mystical symbolism, it's still quite sand-dropping. Illustrations of that dream. Klein was silent for a moment, then turned the page in his hand. The sound of the paper rubbing was inexplicably rough. The things drawn by this insane secret order member slowly appeared before Klein's eyes. The sun outside the window had gradually set, and the crimson moon gradually rose from the distant edge of the city. The mineral lamp in the ward seemed to be stimulated by something, flickering rapidly twice for no reason, but quickly returned to normal. Klein looked at the second page of the notes as if he hadn't been affected at all. It was a painting rendered with a depressing black color. In the painting, a continuous mountain range had an extremely strong dark tone. Small figures were layered on top of each other on the continuous mountain range, seemingly filling the entire mountain range. On the bodies of the seemingly countless black figures, there grew thread after thread of seemingly endless black lines, flying towards the highest peak of the continuous mountain range, connecting to a place that looked like a palace. Looking at such a painting, Klein didn't feel anything terrifying, but felt that this monotonous painting gave people a kind of physiological discomfort. Looks a bit nonsensical, right? Pettigrew said. Klein nodded honestly, not feeling that there was anything terrifying about such a painting, which could only be said to have somewhat depressing colors and layout. Pettigrew then said, Klein, have you ever seen moving corpses? This painting is real. All the little people drawn on the mountain in it, they are all the dead who should have died, moving corpses. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The entire mountain was full of dead people. Looking at the painting, filled with dense, tiny black figures, Klein felt a slight chill run down his spine. According to the previous description of this secret society member, this painting depicts the scene he saw when he advanced to sequence 7, the magician, of the seer pathway, right? If this painting was real, it meant that the entire mountain, densely packed, was full of dead people, full of wandering souls. Yes, Pettigrew nodded, we believe this is knowledge that a high-ranking being capable of influencing the entire seer pathway consciously, or unconsciously, instilled into the lower sequences of the pathway. He pointed to himself. This is somewhat similar to the situation with the seeker pathway. Klein, do you know that there is a being called the Hidden Sage among the high-ranking members of my seeker pathway? The one worshipped by the Moses Ascetics Society, said to be a living god. Klein thought for a moment, rummaging through the miscellaneous information he had jotted down during his previous research to find the being corresponding to that name. Pettigrew said, yes, that's him. For the extraordinary of the entire seeker pathway, and even all pathways, all sequences, the higher the sequence, the easier it is to hear sounds that should not be heard, and see scenes that should not be seen. Speaking to this point, Pettigrew paused for a moment, then continued. The hidden sage was initially closer to an idea, a manifestation of natural law. For example, all things are numbers, which is quite common in my divination field, using spiritual numbers as the source of information from the spirit world. In the early theories of the Moses Ascetics Society, the hidden sage was the embodiment of spiritual numbers, a collection of the concept of knowledge, lacking its own ego, merely an abstract thing. But at some point, the living, hidden sage developed self-will and thought. From that moment on, the extraordinary of the seeker pathway, even sequence 9 seekers, began to feel chased by knowledge. This feeling originates from the existence of the hidden sage. Vast and complex knowledge was animated. The hidden sage sent occult telegrams to the extraordinary of the entire pathway without a fixed frequency, mixing a small amount of useful knowledge among the vast majority of garbage. In more professional terms, this situation is called knowledge-chasing people. The Church has also discussed the reasons for this, and the two main reasons are that the hidden sage's position is high enough, and the characteristics of the seeker pathway itself. Among all the evil gods today, the hidden sage, the true creator, the original witch, the dark side of the universe, and the god of bound, are almost counterparts to the gods we believe in. The hidden sage is basically equivalent to the evil god corresponding to the reader pathway. And high sequence beings can influence mid and low sequence extraordinary to a certain extent, whether consciously or unconsciously, it will have a certain effect. A better situation is like Klein, only seeing and hearing things that should not be seen and heard during the advancement process. For extraordinary of the seeker pathway like pedigree, even in daily life, they may hear those whispers that should not be heard. Of course, it's not just the seekers who are unlucky. The treatment methods of the listeners next door are not much different. Klein had previously heard old Neil mention this, and had also heard sounds that should not be heard during the advancement process, but he did not feel any overly serious consequences when he became a seer. To this, Pedigree smiled. You are in Tingen, there is his protection here. To a large extent, even if the hidden sage targets directional installation, it is at most a bit noisy for seekers living in Tingen City. That one is strong enough to block many influences from the outside world, from high-ranking beings affecting the entire pathway through special means and channels. So, you believe that the insane magician received knowledge instilled from a high-ranking being of the seer pathway? Klein looked at the painting in his hand again. Yes, not only that, but combined with the information from the Church and Miskatonic, what this painting represents should be the Hornassus Mountains in the real world. But unfortunately, in the past 1,000 years, many people have tried to explore the secrets of the Hornassus Mountains, but many people have never returned after going there. Even if the Church's Archbishop and Miskatonic's legendary investigator joined forces to investigate, they returned empty-handed, without any useful information. And those who disappeared in the Hornassus Mountains, it's not that they don't want to come back, but that they can no longer come back. There was a record in the Antigonus family's notebook. Klein suddenly thought of this. Above the Hornassus Mountains, there is an ancient kingdom, the Night Country, where the land of the living and the city of the dead coexist. After the people of the land of the living die, they do not directly enter the underworld, but return to the city of the dead to continue their lives, still living with their relatives and friends from the land of the saints. Pedigree nodded in agreement, but there are very few records about the Night Country. We only know that the kingdom once worshipped a being called the Mother of the Sky. Mother of the Sky. In this era, sometimes knowledge is power. Klein sighed inwardly. So, are all those black figures in this painting secret puppets? Klein made a reasonable guess, combining the high-ranking beings of the seer pathway with the seer's sequence 5. I'm afraid so. Pedigree rotated the direction of the painting in Klein's hand. It's just strange that the Church and Miskatonic's investigators have not found even one secret puppet in the Hornassus Mountains. It's as if those black figures are really just transformed from the souls of those who died on the mountain, spirits unwilling to pass away, shrinking back on their own after encountering investigators who cannot be cleaned up, without easily taking action. Pedigree stood by the window of the ward, watching the gradually rising red moon in the distance, not disturbing Klein from continuing to read the notes below. Klein turned over that page of the diary and continued reading. This is the scene I dreamed of. I drew it down using ritual magic. I'm a little curious, what are these black figures, and what do the continuous mountains and the palaces above the mountains represent? This is obviously something with symbolic meaning, but my divination results cannot give me an accurate answer. This is too vague. I took the painting and went to my guide again. He seemed very surprised that I would dream of this scene. It seemed he believed that such a situation shouldn't occur during the promotion to Sequence 7. What caused this situation to happen? This time, my guide didn't refuse to answer my question. He told me that the scene I dreamed of was the sanctuary of a great existence, the inevitable destination for all of us. The destination for all of us? Why would he say that? It's a very strange statement. Next were many handwritten notes, illustrations, and reflections on mysticism. Klein quickly flipped through them, his eyes skipping over page after page, searching for the information he wanted. Soon, Klein found the notes from the Secret Order's crazed member regarding Tingen City. My guide gave me a mission, to go to Tingen City and help our other members seek something that seems very important. Mr. Nix Miller is truly powerful, strange, and mysterious. I quite look forward to the day I become a faceless magician. He gave me a task, to go to the library of Tingen University and observe its structure, of course, discreetly and without using extraordinary abilities. This is the city where Nicholas Flamel is located. Everything must be done with caution. Things are progressing smoothly. Tingen University is also open to Tingen City residents who are not students, which gives me an opportunity. I have basically reproduced the architectural structure of the Tingen University Library. Is what we are looking for in the Tingen University Library. The thing is gone. Someone took it. Who took it? How is it possible? How strange. Why does Mr. Nix Miller give me a strange feeling today? Is it my imagination? He seems a bit more agile than before. Is it because he has digested the Faceless Magician potion? How strange. As I walk on the road, the eyes of the people around me seem to be watching me intentionally or unintentionally. Is there something on my face? Yes, I am indeed not a faceless, but I don't think my disguise would make ordinary people feel a problem. Where exactly did something go wrong? How strange, how strange, how strange. Mr. Nix Miller is becoming more and more strange. We can match our code words, and his memory is fine. It is impossible for him to be an imposter, but he gives me the feeling of becoming a colder, emotionless marionette. When did this happen? Could it be that Mr. Nix Miller has signs of losing control? I have decided to summon my guide's messenger to ask about this. If Nix Miller shows signs of losing control, I think I must leave Tingen as soon as possible. After all, living is the most important thing. Nothing is more important than living. The messenger has replied, my guide tells me this is a normal phenomenon and there is no need to worry. I am very uneasy. As a seer, my spiritual intuition tells me that something must be wrong here, but where exactly is it? Attached. A reply without the name of the writer. Klein glanced at it. The reply only mentioned that this phenomenon of Nix Miller was a common problem for faceless magicians. He looked at Pettigrew and asked, the faceless magician himself showing symptoms of becoming a marionette, shouldn't that be considered a symptom of losing control? Klein had never actually encountered a Beander who had lost control, so he could only guess. Yes, this situation is already a sign of potential loss of control. Then that's very strange. Why would the Secret Order people think this is a normal phenomenon? Klein frowned. This was a completely illogical situation. Unless the guide of this crazed Secret Order member had a grudge against the Nix Miller who was hanged in front of me, deliberately not reminding him, preparing to sacrifice this crazed member, and leaving Nix Miller in Tingen City forever. The reason is a bit far-fetched, but this is the only reason Klein can think of. Or perhaps, the person from the Secret Order also has a problem. Pettigrew said, this is not impossible, but which one is it? They cannot be sure. Klein continued to turn the page. Now there are only a few pages of notes left in his hand. The crimson moon outside the window has unknowingly climbed onto the roof in the distance. The sky is a brilliant starlight, looking peaceful and serene. I understand where the problem lies. The faceless magician can only marionettize 3 marionettes. The answer in the notes made Klein stare intently. But there are so many eyes, watching me. The me in the mirror, the birds outside the window, the shadows under the floorboards, the dead corners in the room, everyone walking on the road, they all seem to be watching me. I think I'm a little abnormal too, but where am I abnormal? Klein suddenly remembered the mentally disordered shouts of the Secret Order member they had visited before. It's him, it's all him, so many eyes are watching me, it's all him. Who is this? Him, referring to. Everyone is him, everyone is him. That night, Klein ascended above the gray fog, confirming that the ritualistic magic could indeed point to him who was bound to this mysterious space. Klein breathed a sigh of relief. This mysterious space above the gray fog indeed hides many secrets. Sitting at the head of the mottled bronze long table, Klein carefully observed the changes around him while thinking about all the information he had obtained so far. After discovering that this seemingly eternal gray fog had not undergone any changes that Klein could not have predicted, Klein sat in the high-backed chair, his fingers gently tapping the table. All the eyes are watching me, everyone is him. Combining this with what Leonard said before, that the crazed Secret Order member was not out of control, but was scared crazy, Klein had formed a conclusion in his mind. Trick Magician is the Trick Magician, who has already been dealt with by Khoi University, using this opportunity to digest the Trick Magician potion. After all, Trick Magician is Trick Magician, how can it work if it's not tricky? Guessing like this is not wrong. Who digests it doesn't matter, as long as it gets digested. Chapter 267,266. The mysterious servant ultimately needs the Lord of the Mysteries. The Mind Stealer digests the potion. Klein tapped the thoughts he had written down, then conjured a water-absorbing steel pen and placed a question mark next to his ideas. Something's strange. Why take it out on one's own people to digest the potion? And this is Tingen, a city of miracles where angels exist. Isn't it a bit much to digest the potion here? Aren't they afraid of being caught by MI9? Later on, they were indeed caught. Also, the matter of Nix Miller being hanged, upon closer inspection, is also very problematic. Klein pondered, writing down the phrase, mastermind behind the notebook theft, on the parchment. He connected Nix Miller, the mastermind behind the notebook theft, the Secret Order member who was scared insane, and the Mind Stealers of the Secret Order with black lines, pondered for a moment, then silently crossed out several of the lines. In an instant, Klein vaguely felt he had grasped something, but that inspiration was fleeting. Klein frowned but still helplessly shook his head. Without enough preconditions, even divination will hardly yield the correct answer. After confirming that the ritual could indeed point to him, and that using similar descriptions to celestial worthy of heaven and earth, could indeed utilize the mysterious space above the gray fog, Klein simulated that falling sensation, left the mysterious space above the gray fog, and returned to the real world. St. Peter's Hospital. Turning down the brightness of the miner's lamp, Klein read a book for a while. Considering that the monster born from Riel Bieber seemed to possess a certain degree of divinity, Dunn Smith, the captain, gave the only injured member who directly faced Riel Bieber 5 days of sick leave to recuperate in St. Peter's Hospital, preventing any possible sequelae. After all, the doctors at St. Peter's Hospital are equally excellent in treating mental illnesses and the effects caused by extraordinary means. After reading The Origins of Ritual Magic and Semiotics, a book that was extremely hypnotic, Klein's eyelids drooped involuntarily. He closed the book, placed it on the bedside table, went to the washroom, and prepared to sleep. Whatever it is, let's talk about it tomorrow. Yawning, Klein lay down and entered a dream. Time passed, second by second. Klein heard a strange, somewhat familiar sound again. The sound of something heavy being dragged was somewhat noisy through the walls of the ward. Awakened by the noise, Klein sat up in bed in a daze. In his hazy vision, Klein looked towards the observation window on the ward door. He saw the scene he had seen before again. Outside the observation window, many people were moving forward stiffly. There's an activity again tonight. Klein was about to lie down again, but suddenly realized something. Klein suddenly opened his eyes, and all the drowsiness disappeared at once. He noticed that something was wrong with the scene he had just seen. Are these people that tall? The position of the observation window was probably a little below Klein's head, but from Klein's perspective sitting on the hospital bed, he could only see the chins of those walking outside. Only seeing their chins, their height must be at least 2 meters, right? Although Klein couldn't say he had seen all the patients on this floor of St. Peter's Hospital, he had only seen one forsaken person with a leg in a cast and a height of nearly 2 meters. Where did so many people of that exaggerated height come from? Klein's eyes swept over the swaying figures outside the window one by one. As a seer, Klein clearly perceived that the source of this strangeness and disharmony was not just their height. When these people moved, their shoulders didn't swing. Just like the corpses of animals hanging on machines for transport in slaughterhouses that Klein had seen before his transmigration, those people passing by outside the door seemed to be moving, but they themselves were motionless. What's going on? Klein's gaze narrowed slightly. He keenly remembered a scene he had once seen. Nix Miller, the Sequence 5 puppet master, was hanged on a streetlight on the way to seek help. At that time, the condition of that puppet master was somewhat similar to the moving people outside the door. They were all hanged up. Puppets. Has someone in St. Peter's Hospital been puppetized? Another puppet master, or a mind stealer? Did the secret order come to silence people, preparing to kill him and communicate with spirits? The corners of Klein's mouth trembled slightly. The people outside the door seemed to have noticed something. Those patients passing by Klein's ward slowly turned their heads stiffly. Klein quickly lay back down, pretending to be sound asleep, but his palms were already covered in cold sweat. St. Peter's Hospital's security measures aren't bad. There are many large-scale ritual magics and a large number of extraordinary people here. Intruders will be discovered quickly. Just then, there were 2 soft knocks on the door. Is there anyone inside? Outside the door, a hoarse, dry voice, like fingernails scratching across steel, echoed in the corridor of St. Peter's Hospital at night. At some point, the faint light of the miner's lamp in the corridor outside had gone out. Person inside, are you awake? Person inside, why aren't you talking? Person inside, if you don't speak, I'm going to come in. A creaking sound slowly rang out, as if the patients outside the door had opened the door. Inside the ward, the light of the miner's lamp that Klein had turned down before going to sleep suddenly went out. The room fell into a pitch-black silence, only the scarlet moonlight outside the window faintly illuminated the dark ward. And that sound of heavy objects being dragged was approaching Klein step by step from the door. Crap. Klein half opened his eyes, and seeing that he had already alarmed the other party, he whispered quickly in ancient Hermes. The embodiment of all incorrect errors, fallacies, and loopholes, guiding the hand of fate. I beseech your gaze, beseech your favor, beseech you to see the anomalies within St. Peter's Hospital. This was his honorific name. Since Klein clearly realized that he couldn't deal with this monster, immediately chanting this honorific name to seek protection was the best choice. After all, praying to the goddess might not get a response, but in Tingen, praying to him had a higher chance of getting attention and protection. The swaying sound of something heavy being dragged that had reached Klein's bedside suddenly stopped abruptly. Success. Has his gaze been cast over? Klein opened his eyes, and with the help of the crimson moon outside the window, a deformed, festering, pus-filled head, crawling with transparent worms going in and out, was face to face with Klein, pressed together. Hee. The monster revealed a smile, the teeth in its mouth clattering to the ground, followed by more transparent worms crawling out of its black, abyss-like mouth. Klein suddenly widened his eyes. You're awake. Spiritual intuition screamed wildly. With a buzz, Klein's brain felt like it had been hit hard, and he was suddenly in a daze, but before the fear could spread to his limbs, Klein's eyes flickered, and the monster in front of him had disappeared. Like struggling upstream from the bottom of a drowning sea, finally swimming to the surface, Klein gasped for breath. The slightly dim light of the mineral lamp illuminated the entire ward, and the noise of Klein's sudden jump to his feet caused the nurse on night duty to knock on the ward door. Mr. Moretti, what happened? The nurse asked. Klein hesitated slightly and looked around, his body already drenched in cold sweat. Scared, his lips were a bloodless pale, and his face was frighteningly ugly. Nothing. Just had a nightmare. Klein took a breath, feeling that since he transmigrated, the frequency of his nightmares seemed to have increased a lot. Klein got out of bed, entered the washroom, and prepared to take a shower to wash away all the sticky, scared-out sweat. Tomorrow, should I go to the psychiatric department to see a psychologist? Sigh, I don't know if it's the problem with that monster Riel Bieber, or the notes of that crazy secret society member that Pedigree showed me this afternoon. He didn't notice that under his bed, a black shadow quietly poked out its head. That rotten, festering, pus-filled head, crawling with transparent worms, showed a sincere, yet terrifying, smile at the back entering the washroom. Hee, are you asleep? Are you really awake? Within the mysterious space above the gray fog, the faceless is using the fear of the secret society member to digest the potion. In the mysterious space above the gray fog, Mr. Error, sitting at the head of the long bronze table, smiled slightly. That's a good direction. What do you think, Tang? The young man sitting at the bottom of the long bronze table was now squirming on the high-backed chair in a boneless manner. Hey. Hearing this, he raised his eyelids and glanced around. He yawned, comfortably changed to a more informal posture, and looked upside down at Mr. Error, at the head of the long bronze table. Ah, this guess isn't wrong. It's just a simple subject-verb agreement mistake. It seems he's about to guess that, besides the secret society and the Alisuhad pen, there's another hidden force. It's only a matter of time, or rather, it's slower than I thought. I specifically asked Eamon to remind Klein, but it seems Klein hasn't connected Amon's words yet. Leonard Mitchell, who was parasitized by Eamon, heard the terrifying whispers from Hornassus, Phlegra, when the seer pathway was advancing, which were all small hints Tang gave to Klein. But this requires time to ferment, and also requires correct and active guidance. Eamon, Antigonus, and even the entire Tingen city, all the orthodox churches, will be an inevitable part of the predetermined numbers and destiny when the future arrives. Of course, the more important point is that the Saphira Castle cannot casually give Klein a boost of spirituality from time to time. This will make it difficult for him to maintain the lowest limit of being human. Mr. Error looked around, then looked at Tang at the bottom of the long bronze table. How's the situation over there? The technology tree of the civilization that believes in the supernova dominator is very interesting. Ah, the vast universe can always give birth to many things we don't know, which gives me a lot of inspiration. The supercomputer built with the authority of the time worm and the knowledge wilderness as an exchange for the supernova dominator civilization is not a loss. As a collection of spirit worms, Tang did not send many spirit worms to the Saphira Castle through Klein and Nicholas Flamel, in order to subtly pollute the Saphira Castle as much as possible without stimulating it, leaving a mark here to prepare for subsequent plans. There are almost no ordinary people left in the southern continent. In the eastern continent, the ritual nodes of Miskatonic University have also been repaired successfully, preparing for the subsequent godhood ritual. In the western continent, the marionettes are working overtime to use Euclidean space, error, mystery servants, plus the extraordinary abilities of the Saphira Castle and the Planeswalkers to analyze the problems left by the celestial worthy, trying to sneak in and establish contact with those Sephiroth first. In the Intis Republic, the plan to use the special mirror world in Trier of the Fourth Epoch has been put on the daily agenda. Well, the obstruction of the primordial moon goddess is also expected, but when the Red Priest is born, the plan should also come to an end. If we can cooperate with the primordial moon goddess, that would naturally be better. If we can't cooperate, we'll use the aggregation of extraordinary characteristics to lure her out and forcibly make her into a marionette. I have a feeling that the time of the apocalypse is not far from us. Mr. Error paused for a few seconds, then asked, "It seems you plan to make sufficient preparations before the Lord of the Mysteries is born." Tang stretched out his hand and pulled at the gray fog around him. The gray fog fled quickly as if it had seen some plague god. Tang couldn't help but mutter, "Why are you so afraid of me? A collection of worms can't become my marionette. Maybe it's because you're kind." Mr. Error smiled. "The plan that has been planned for thousands of years is about to be staged. How can I say, after transmigrating, I have to leave something behind, right?" Tang sat up straight for a moment, leaned on the long bronze table. I heard Eamon complaining there before, saying something like, "I'm actually psychologically twisted like his paranoid brother. Compared to Adam's attitude of sacrificing everyone and bearing everyone's sins for his own plan, I'm much better." Tang said very calmly, "At least, I won't easily let anyone die. As for the marionettes, of course, they are not considered people, just a necessary link, tools that can be replaced and discarded at any time." Klein, well, Joe Mingrui, a mystery servant, after all, needs a lord of the mysteries to serve. In the latter half of the night, Klein was plagued by fragmented nightmares. At times, he would transform in his dreams into Klein Moretti before his transmigration, the one controlled by the Antigonus family notes, who shot himself in the head. Other times, he became Nix Miller, hanging from a lamppost. Sometimes he faced the monster Riel Bieber had transformed into, and other times he lay alone in a lightless hospital room, the corridors outside filled with emotionless, corpse-spotted, wind-swaying, cured meat, dried corpses. Bizarre and grotesque images and scenes mingled in his dreams with reality, and sometimes Klein would jolt awake and need several minutes to distinguish that he was in the real world and not in those terrifying dreams. This night of incessant nightmares also caused Klein to wake up the next day without any of the feeling of refreshment and renewal that should come from a good night's sleep, only feeling pain in every nerve in his brain. "It sounds like some kind of aftereffect from seeing that painting." Pettigrew pondered for a moment and said, "Perhaps that painting gave you some stimulation. After all, This is a high-ranking being on the seer pathway using some kind of mystical means to send knowledge indiscriminately to all beyonders on the entire pathway. Although we can be sure that this knowledge does not carry pollution, it is normal for there to be other hidden dangers and problems. After all, I am a secret suppliant, not a seer. Beneath Klein's eyelids were faint bluish-black marks, the aftereffect of waking up from time to time last night and then falling back into a drowsy sleep. Originally, Klein had been a little unable to sleep after having the first dream, but after lying down on the bed, he had drifted off into a daze again. It was the same afterward. Each nightmare felt as if it had really happened, often requiring Klein some time to calm down after waking up, but the mental fatigue made him fall into a stupor again. Followed by being startled awake again. Make an appointment with a psychologist and see them this afternoon. I will notify the captain and Khoi University about this issue. Your case is very special. Pettigrew said this, and then suddenly seemed to think of something, adding, "Oh, right, you can also check for other physical problems. You haven't had your pre-employment physical examination yet, so you can take this opportunity to do one." Okay. Klein nodded. Afternoon. Street. Peter's Hospital, Department of Psychiatry. Klein, dressed in a patient's gown, followed the nurse leading the way in the Department of Psychiatry. On the lawn outside the psychiatric building, they saw again the man with a thick, golden beard and childlike golden eyes whom Klein had seen before. "Who is that?" he asked the nurse leading him with some curiosity. The nurse glanced in that direction and quickly retracted her gaze. Her tone was without inflection as she said, "A resident patient in the Department of Psychiatry." "Yes, he is a mentally ill patient with severe obsessive-compulsive disorder and schizophrenia. It's best not to approach him easily, Mr. Moretti, as it will bring you misfortune." A resident patient suffering from obsessive-compulsive disorder and schizophrenia. Come to think of it, I seem to have heard the nurse call him number 3 last time. So it wasn't some kind of persecution complex. Klein was quite surprised. Are there many resident patients in the Department of Psychiatry? Led by the nurse, Klein walked into the psychiatric building and took the elevator upstairs. During this process, Klein didn't see many patients active. A few patients wearing patient gowns, upon seeing Klein and the nurse, ran away with miserable whimpers, like mice seeing a cat. They certainly seemed quite ill. Hearing Klein's question, the nurse simply shook her head, "Not many. The vast majority of patients admitted to our hospital's Department of Psychiatry are either regular patients who only need guidance from a psychologist and can walk out on their own, or severely ill patients whose mental state is poor and whose physical and mental defenses have both collapsed, requiring surgical treatment. The former don't need to occupy resources in the Department of Psychiatry, and the latter have most likely become monsters out of control. Even if they are rescued, they become monsters whose appearance is not suitable for walking outside. Then the resident patients are. Mr. Moretti, we're here." Before Klein could finish his question, the elevator doors opened, and they arrived at the psychologist's consultation room on the 7th floor. The nurse took the lead in walking out. "The psychologist Mr. Neal booked for you is Dr. Ademiel Sowers, please follow me." Klein quickly realized that the nurse who had brought him here did not want to talk about the resident patient. "The only resident patient I currently know of is that Mystic Society member who was scared out of his mind. Strictly speaking, there was actually another one, that number 3 patient spacing out on the lawn downstairs. However, Dr. Ademiel Sowers. I should have seen this Dr. Ademiel Sowers twice before. The first time was in the inpatient building, when he was still a patient suffering from persecution complex and schizophrenia. The second time was here in the Department of Psychiatry. Only a few days had passed, and he had gone from being a mentally ill patient to a psychologist capable of treating other people's mental illnesses. However, this is a society with extraordinary powers. If Ademiel Sowers was once a mind reader who later advanced to Sequence 7's psychologist, and quickly got rid of his terrible state through treatment, it's not impossible." Klein sensed some strange points, but he did not mention a request to change psychologists. "This is Tingen City, this is St. Peter's Hospital, a city protected by angels. At least, many things on the surface shouldn't have any problems." Following the nurse leading the way, Klein walked to a consultation room at the end of the corridor on the 5th floor. A sign hung on the door, written in Lunis, "Consultation Room 17, Psychologist, Ademiel Sowers' office." The nurse knocked on the door, and after hearing a, "Please come in," from inside, the nurse and Klein entered this place written as Consultation Room 17. "Dr. Ademiel Sowers, this is Klein Moretti." Okay, thank you. Wearing a white coat couldn't hide that Dr. Ademiel Soers looked like a young man, only that he was surrounded by a slightly decadent temperament. Klein sat across from Dr. Ademerser, who seemed exceptionally young and somewhat naive, perhaps due to a lack of social experience. He carefully examined the doctor but found nothing unusual. When Dr. Ademerser saw that it was Klein Moretti, a flicker of emotion seemed to cross his eyes, but he quickly and perfectly concealed it. He picked up his pen and medical record, asking routinely, "Mr. Moretti, your attending physician tells me you've been experiencing frequent nightmares lately. Don't worry about confidentiality. Street. Peter's Hospital maintains a good working relationship with the Nighthawks of the Church of the Night. Everything you say will be kept under the tacit rules that exist within Tingen, and we will not disclose the privacy of any patient. You can regard me as an outsider whose destiny has no intersection with yours." After Klein Moretti left the consultation room, Dr. Ademerser stood up. Having just completed a psychotherapy session, he was preparing to rest for a moment when he suddenly heard a knock on the door. Could Klein Moretti have forgotten something? The thought flashed through Ademerser's mind. He sat back down and said, "Come in." The door opened from the outside. Dr. Ademerser looked at the woman with a gentle face and brown hair cascading to her waist. He suddenly stood up, exclaiming in surprise, "Dean, no need to be so alarmed, Dr. Ademerser," the woman who had entered said with a light smile. "It seems you've begun to adapt to the outsiders' bestowed powers." Dr. Ademerser lowered his head in fear and trepidation, his voice slightly trembling. Yes, thank you to St. Peter's for the psychoanalysis and treatment, which allowed me to recover my thinking and no longer be trapped in that state of mental confusion and loss of reason. Seeing the truth of the world, understanding the trend of the future, becoming a puppet of fate, this is what the outsider needs to see clearly, and what the outsider needs to accept, the gentle-faced woman said in a similarly kind voice, with the tenderness of a mother holding a baby. "Mr. Klein Moretti is a very important patient of ours, Dr. Ademerser." Yes, Dean, I will do my best to treat him and stabilize his mental state." The motherly woman nodded slightly and said softly, "Yes, constantly caring about the patient's mental state is clearly what a qualified psychologist should do." Dr. Ademerser nervously clenched his fist, but quickly released it again. "Yes, Dean, very good." The motherly woman looked gently at the young man in front of her, who was born with half a monster solidified within him. His intuition was high, and he often saw things he shouldn't see and heard sounds he shouldn't hear, so he often talked nonsense and was often hurt. "You must understand, everything we do, all our actions, all the fates we can see and cannot see, the actions we understand and do not understand, are both fixed numbers in destiny." Klein was alone in the descending elevator, no nurses accompanied him. The soundproofing of St. Peter's psychiatric ward seemed quite good. Even though there were some permanent residents here, Klein didn't hear the loud shouts, hysterical roars, or screams. There are no electroshock therapies like the Thunder Monarch. In the world of the extraordinary, many things don't need to be so troublesome. With a sufficient number of doctors and extraordinary individuals, St. Peter's Hospital should be able to cope with the vast majority of those diseases that Klein couldn't solve before his transmigration. The elevator descended all the way, and when it passed the 6th floor, Klein glanced at the elevator's floor display, but the elevator quickly reached the 5th floor. The elevator doors on the 6th floor did not open this time. Last time, he didn't clearly see whose ward was on the 6th floor. The iron ring on the door of the 1st ward and the painting on the door of the 2nd ward were quite memorable to Klein. But this is St. Peter's Hospital, so it's better not to be so adventurous. After all, even if he was curious, Klein knew that curiosity killed the cat. The elevator quickly reached the 1st floor. No one used the elevator during Klein's descent. When he walked out of the psychiatric ward, he was bathed in the warm sunlight, slightly dispelling the uncontrollable chill that had come over him. Bathing in the sunlight, Klein saw on the lawn in front of the psychiatric ward the number 3 patient, still sitting on the lawn holding a strange doll with 5 heads, a thick golden beard, and golden eyes, fiddling with the toy in his hand somewhat bored. Klein remembered the nurse's previous answer. Patients with a certain degree of obsessive-compulsive disorder and schizophrenia, different from other regular patients and critically ill patients, are patients who need long-term treatment in the psychiatric department. Klein glanced at the patient who was said to also have schizophrenia, but didn't find anything strange about him. On the contrary, he was quite quiet, not at all like the stereotype of mentally ill people in Klein's memory. Was it because he hadn't had an episode yet? But the doll in his hand was quite creepy. Klein, what are you doing here? Someone called him. Klein turned his head and saw Tang holding a file folder. Tang, what are you doing here? I should be the one asking that, right? Tang waved the file bag in his hand. Bringing something over. Upon hearing this, Klein didn't hide anything. I've been having nightmares lately, so I came to see a psychologist. He smiled. After all, free things are worth taking advantage of. Nightmares. Tang tilted his head. Because of Riel Bieber's issue? Or the things in that Mad Hermetic Order member's notes? My doctor tells me it should be both. Speaking of the Mad Hermetic Order member, Klein suddenly thought, Tang, you should also be an extraordinary being of the seer pathway, right? He had seen Tang use a paper figurine substitute before. Paper figurine substitute is one of the extraordinary abilities acquired by the Sequence 7, magician, of the seer pathway. Yes, Tang nodded, not intending to hide it. I'm a Sequence 7 magician. I should be able to try to become a faceless one soon. You want to ask what I thought of those Mad Hermetic Order members' notes? Tang thought for a moment and said, the notes written by that crazy Hermetic Society member do have some things that look quite disturbing, but after reading those notes and looking at those strange paintings, I really didn't feel anything. I didn't have nightmares, nor did I experience any auditory or visual hallucinations. No problems at all. Is this because Tang is already a Sequence 7 magician, or is it due to his own special characteristics? Special characteristics. At the mention of this, Klein's first reaction was to think of the gray fog, which was very likely the culprit behind his transmigration, the mysterious space above the gray fog. Is it because of that I had a corresponding stress response after seeing those things? As Klein's thoughts raced, Tang shook the file bag in his hand again. I still have things to do. Oh, right, Klein, after you're discharged, would you like to come to Tingen University for some physical training classes? He asked, as if remembering something. Physical training, not the kind open to ordinary people, but one specifically for Beyonders. Tang explained, Khoi University also has this course, which is considered one of the basic courses at Miskatonic University. It's aimed at Beyonders who aren't very good at close combat, to improve their chances of survival in battle, and to fight cultists. A kind of combat training. Okay, if I have time later. Klein nodded with a smile. Tang didn't say anything more, waved his hand, and entered the psychiatric ward of St. Peter's Hospital, without looking at patient number 3, who was staring at them from the lawn in front of the ward. Klein collected his thoughts, his gaze also swept over patient number 3, who had been staring at them without blinking for who knows how long, before leaving the psychiatric ward to return to his own room. Sitting on the lawn, holding a strange doll with 5 heads, patient number 3 was very quiet, his innocent, childlike golden eyes moving away from Tang, who had entered the ward, and falling on Klein, who had already walked away. After a long while, he slowly opened his mouth and said, I want to drink some vodka tonight. That won't do, patient number 3. Patients are not allowed to drink alcohol. A nearby nurse had sharp hearing, and her refusal was quite straightforward. In patient number 3's innocent, childlike eyes, tears immediately welled up when he heard the nurse's unwavering refusal. Like a child who couldn't get candy, he instantly switched from a calm and restrained adult to a crying and noising child. But, I just want to drink. I want to drink, I want to drink, I want to drink. Klein, who was not far away, heard the faint crying behind him. He turned his head to take a look and saw the man with a full beard, who had been very calm just now, rolling and howling on the lawn, the 5-headed doll in his hand hitting the ground again and again. After a while, one of the doll's heads was torn off from the main body and rolled far away. That ferocious, somewhat terrifying head happened to fall not far from Klein. The nurse quickly ran over to pick up the head that had fallen off due to the forceful tearing. Mr. Moretti, didn't scare you, did it? No, Klein smiled, but silently sighed in his heart. Mental patience. Living in this world is probably quite difficult. However, logically speaking, mental illnesses that don't involve supernatural factors should be the type that psychologists can easily cure. Why do the permanent patients here, with very ordinary conditions, have to stay here? It's a bit strange, but Klein shook his head. It shouldn't have anything to do with him. Before pitying others, he should pity himself first. If he still has that kind of dream tonight, then he really has to consider transferring to another hospital. In the evening, after treatment by psychologist Dr. Atomizer, Klein clearly felt that his mental state had stabilized a lot. When the red moon descended once again, Klein turned off the lights and prepared to sleep. He looked at the observation window at the door, remained silent for a moment, and opened the door to discuss with the nurse on duty outside, adding a small curtain to the observation window. In this way, the inside of the room could not see the outside, and the outside of the room could not see the inside. Although this was likely just for mental comfort, Klein decided to follow his heart's desire. Hopefully I won't have any nightmares tonight. Klein took a light breath before going to sleep, turned down the brightness of the mineral lamp, and then fell into a deep sleep. Midnight. The sound of dragging heavy objects came from outside the door once again. Klein frowned and slowly, gradually, opened his eyes. The room was already pitch black. Perhaps because the sunwell ore installed in the mineral lamp in the room had been completely burned out, the light of the mineral lamp, which should have emitted a faint light, had now been extinguished. Only the scarlet moon outside the window shone into the ward through the curtains, bringing a faint, imperceptible brightness. Klein moved his body, without making any sound. His eyeballs rotated slightly, looking towards the direction of the ward door. The curtain that Klein had asked the nurse to pull over the observation window was now imprinted with many black shadows of bodies slowly walking. Those were the shadows projected onto the curtain by the light of the mineral lamps in the corridor. This dream. Klein frowned, wanting to forcibly ignore this situation, but he suddenly woke up, as if an alarm clock had suddenly rung in his brain, instantly sweeping away his drowsiness. Sometimes, dreams are also a projection of reality. You may encounter many things in reality that you have not yet noticed, but your spirituality, your subconscious, remembers them. These small details that you failed to notice are sometimes influenced by your own subconscious and presented to you in the form of dreams. Stimulation by the notes of a Hermetic Society member allows your subconscious to discover problems. Therefore, you begin to have strange nightmares. Of course, this is just one guess. There are many possibilities for the creation of dreams, and I cannot guarantee whether this guess is the truth of the matter. During the day, Dr. Atomizer had analyzed Klein's dreaming behavior once. What Klein remembered in his mind were also these words that Dr. Atomizer had said. This is some kind of manifestation of my subconscious. This represents things that I didn't notice before, details that were connected by the notes of the crazy Hermetic Society member. Klein turned over, his voice very small, very light. Klein remembered his dream last night. The monster outside the door entered the room because it sensed his gaze. In other words, those monsters are sensitive to being watched. It's also uncertain whether they are equally sensitive to sounds. Careful as a cat on tiptoes, Klein didn't put on slippers. Barefoot, he moved to a position behind the hospital room door. He also didn't open the curtains to observe the situation in the corridor through the observation window. As a seer, the most important thing to do before acting should be to perform a divination. But without suitable tools at hand, Klein was afraid the sound of flipping a coin would startle the monsters outside. He looked at the shadows outside through the curtains, finding they were still moving in an orderly fashion, bodies motionless, towards the end of the corridor. He then bent down and pressed his ear against the door, preparing to listen to the situation outside. It seems they haven't discovered him. Ears pressed tightly against the hospital room door, Klein heard some rustling sounds in the corridor, but they weren't very clear, a kind of muffled noise as if through a layer. What are you going to do today? A brain transplant. My head is too stupid. I need a new, useful head. What about you? My fingers aren't very flexible. I'll change an arm. Are there enough materials? There should be. Recently, many have turned into underground. I'm about to give birth. I don't know what this child will be like. The last child. Are you, alright? Brain transplant, changing an arm because the fingers aren't flexible. Giving birth. The corners of Klein's mouth twitched, and a familiar chill ran up his spine once again. If this is my dream, then what do the things these monsters are saying represent? And underground. The St. Peter's Hospital underground. Or is there some other symbolic meaning? Symbolizing darkness, filth, something that can't see the light of day. As a seer, Klein had also learned methods of dream interpretation, but only this kind of rather abstract dream imagery and symbolism, without having seen concrete, physical forms, meant that he, as just a seer, couldn't analyze any more useful information. How much longer do you think we have? It should be soon. Soon. What was soon? Klein was very careful, not making the slightest sound, but behind him, from the direction of the hospital bed in the room, something seemed to have accidentally made a noise. Klein abruptly turned his head. He saw two withered, gaunt arms, covered in crawling insects, extending from under his bed, something clawing at the edge of the bed, seemingly wanting to pull itself out from underneath. Oops, we've been discovered. Klein's pupils suddenly dilated. With the aid of a large amount of crimson moonlight that had appeared at some unknown time, he saw the monster he had seen yesterday, with a deformed, festering, pus-filled face, covered in transparent insects crawling in and out of its face. This thing, it's been under my bed the whole time. You're awake. The monster gave Klein a bizarre smile, and then, like a nimble, four-legged spider, it crawled out from under the bed and pounced in his direction. The monsters outside seemed to have also noticed the abnormality. With a bang, the glass of the observation window shattered. The corpse with the broken neck, the monster with the twisted arm, the male figure with the large belly, they were all crowded at the window of the observation window, sticking their heads in, giving Klein a similarly bizarre, almost identical smile. You're awake. With a buzz, the feeling of tinnitus and nausea made him breathe heavily. Klein woke up once again. He didn't even wipe the sweat from his forehead, but quickly rolled out of bed and looked under his bed. But under the bed, it was empty, there was nothing. The mineral lamp in the room still emitted a faint light. There were no severed corpses hanging in the corridor, no monsters with twisted arms, and no pregnant men. Indeed, it was a dream. But Klein really couldn't sleep now. Turning up the brightness of the mineral lamp, Klein quickly drew the faces of several people from his dream on paper with the aid of ritual magic. Looking at those disfigured faces, he resisted the urge to throw them away, allowing his spirituality to take the dominant position, but he only vaguely felt that he seemed to have seen these faces somewhere. These, the monsters' faces. He was silent for a moment, carefully set the divination statement, and prepared to perform dream divination. Having a symbol inevitably means that these people have some connection to reality. These people, perhaps Klein has seen them. In the dream, the identities of these people. In the dream, the identities of these people. Repeating it 7 times, Klein fell backward, entering the dream. But the dream was empty, there was nothing. I haven't seen these people. Klein frowned upon waking up. Then, he suddenly thought of something. No, it's also possible that the divination result was affected by a higher level power. This is a very common possibility for divination failure. After all, he was just a sequence 9 seer. Since the real world doesn't work, then whether changing the environment, changing to a higher level, more mysterious environment, can improve the success rate of divination and eliminate interference. Other seers may not be able to do it, but Klein really has such a mysterious, high-level place. Klein stood up, entered the washroom, and after locking the washroom door, he took 4 steps backward, entering above the gray fog. I don't know if it will succeed, but I'll try it first. Klein conjured paper and pen, wrote the same divination statement, and entered the dream in the same way as dream divination. And this time, he saw it. Several scenes flashed by quickly, with 4 scenes flashing separately. Klein saw a fellow patient brushing past him in the St. Peter's Hospital cafeteria, saw a passerby he saw on the carriage to 32 Red Rose Street, saw a tenant at 47 Golden Rose Street preparing to go to work, and saw the thief who once stole the wallet of the original body's friend, Dun Earps, outside Khoi University. The faces of these people in the dream suddenly twisted, forming one vortex after another. They all twisted their heads 180 degrees from the dream, seemingly gazing remotely at Klein Moretti, who was peeking at them using dream divination. When he saw those ordinary, plain, and unremarkable faces, Klein's pupils first dilated suddenly, then rapidly contracted to a small point. Beneath those ordinary, plain faces, the necks twisted grotesquely 180 degrees, facing away from the heads, staring at Klein in an eerie manner. On their bodies, strands of illusory black lines, which Klein seemed to have seen before, extended towards the edge of the dream, firmly grasped by an unseen hand. They were all puppets, all secret puppets manipulated by someone. After those heads, rotated 180 degrees, revealed eerie smiles, the dream shattered in that instant. The scene presented in the dream divination instantly transformed into clumps of unclear, twisted, wriggling masses, like giant vortices composed of countless intertwined worms, instantly tearing apart Klein's dream, and further attacking Klein, who was in the mysterious space above the gray fog, through the dream. It was as if he had divined something that could not be divined. Klein had divined something extremely terrifying. Even through a layer of gray fog, even in the mysterious space above the gray fog, just that gaze caused the entire mysterious space above the gray fog to tremble and shake frantically. This was the first time Klein had encountered such a situation. The magnificent palace above the gray fog instantly transformed into dense, boundless gray-white mist, and the countless gray-white mist seemed to turn into vortices of intertwined worms, transparent and translucent. Klein cried out miserably, falling to the ground, his body cracking. From the cracks on his skin, countless transparent, translucent worms seemed to crawl in and out of his incorporeal flesh, tearing at Klein's spiritual body, bringing pollution and destroying his spirit. On his body, illusory, transparent black lines emerged, as if something was trying to manipulate the threads of his spiritual body, wanting to hang him up and turn him into a secret puppet. Klein gritted his teeth and persevered, whimpering. His brain was a chaotic mess, as if countless worms had burrowed into his brain, tearing at his cerebral cortex and gnawing at his flesh. No Zuo no die. He didn't know how long had passed, but the frantic trembling above the gray fog finally stopped. Klein, whose collapsing form seemed to be an aggregate of countless worms, was gradually reassembling his spiritual body, but still appeared extremely weak. Not dead, and didn't turn into a secret puppet. Dream divination, it seems I divined something terrible. He lay on the ground, not in a hurry to get up, looking at the dome of the magnificent palace that had returned to stability, thinking with a somewhat bitter amusement. After catching his breath for a moment, Klein sat back in his high-backed chair, calming his emotions. The cracks on his body, as if countless worms were about to crawl out, also returned to normal, but compared to before, they were a bit more illusory and dim. He glanced at himself, not seeing the illusory, transparent black lines from just now. Klein secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then sorted out what he had seen and his plans for the future. But these 4 dream fragments are all very ordinary, very commonplace people. Why would they suddenly become like that? This was something Klein couldn't understand no matter what, but just divining them would cause such a strong backlash. If he were to perform divination in the real world, and it was successful, Klein felt that St. Peter's Hospital could recover his already exploded, maggot-infested corpse the next day. Remembering the pain of tearing at his spiritual body just now, Klein shivered, feeling a bit chilled. How could these people possibly be ordinary people? Slightly calming his mind, Klein sat at the head of the bronze long table, conjured a fountain pen, and wearily wrote down the problematic people from the 4 scenes he had seen. A passerby seen on the road, a thief stealing at the entrance of Khoi University, a resident of 47 Golden Rose Street, and a patient at St. Peter's Hospital. Their identities, ages, social circles, etc., should all have no overlap. Why would they appear in my dream, and why would I suffer a backlash when divining these people? Klein held the fountain pen, tapping it on the bronze long table, little by little. Then, he picked up the fountain pen again and wrote a few lines of words below the materialized parchment. The Antigonus family's notebook, a crazed secret order member, a seer, a painting. These were all things related to the seer pathway. Klein started having nightmares after seeing the monster Riel Bieber transformed into when he entered St. Peter's Hospital. After reading the notebook of the crazed secret order member, the signs of those nightmares intensified again. Associating this with Sequence 5 of the seer pathway, whose potion name was Secret Puppet Master, and Sequence 4, whose potion name was Trick Sorcerer, Klein felt that the temperature above the gray fog seemed to become a bit gloomy. Could it be that these people are all secret puppets? The crazed secret order member's notebook mentioned that there seemed to be many secret puppets on the Hornassus mountain range. Is this a hint? Because of this, I deepened my knowledge and connection to the mysteries of secret puppets. With the strengthening of my spiritual intuition, it's like passing a judgment in a Cthulhu tabletop game. Under the pollution of Riel Bieber and the crazed secret order member's notebook, my spiritual intuition passed the judgment, so I saw this hospital ghost story composed of these scenes in my dream. The concentration of seers in Khoi City is simply unimaginably high, suffocating. Klein felt a bit suffocated. The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Can he go home? He doesn't want to stay here anymore. Simulating the feeling of falling, after exiting from above the gray fog, he was about to go out and ask Petty Gull about the situation, only to remember that it was the middle of the night. Klein had no choice but to lie in bed, but he couldn't sleep anymore. The next day, when Petty Gull came over and brought a few ritual books, Klein asked Petty Gull with a casual chatting attitude, as if he had suddenly remembered something. By the way, Petty Gull, what happened to that guy who stole things at the entrance of Tingen University last time? At that time, Klein was taken into Tingen University by Dunn, and the subsequent arrest of the thief was left to Petty Gull. Naturally, the wallet was recovered, but Petty Gull didn't seem to mention the final handling of the thief at the time. Why are you curious about this? Pettigrew was a little surprised, but still said, Tingen City prohibits any improper acts of theft. As for the thieves who commit such mistakes, I handed them over to the security department of Tingen University, and they should be sent to the police station. Improper acts of theft, is there such a thing as proper theft? Klein complained inwardly, and then asked curiously, in this kind of situation, how many years would they be sentenced to? He remembered that in the dream divination, the face symbolizing the pregnant man corresponded to the thief who stole Tang's wallet. Of course, Klein only thought that pregnancy was some kind of symbol. Before encountering the Great Mother and the Desire Mother tree, well, before. Depending on the value of the stolen items, those of lesser value are sentenced to 1 to 3 months of quarry work, while those of greater value result in imprisonment and other criminal punishments. After all, the prohibition of improper or profitable means is the unspoken rule of this city, and no one can violate it. Quarry work, Klein had never heard of it before. Did it refer to reform through labor? Yes, quarry work at the Sungwell mine. Pettigrew put down the book in his hand, preparing to leave. Sungwell ore is a very important mineral resource in Tingen City. The Sungwell ore that we use daily for lighting and many solar-related ritual magic materials is one of the characteristics of this city. I remember, it should be sent to Ram Town in the northwest direction. People in Tingen City usually don't go there. There are also many people with connections there. Beyonders and ordinary people alike. And those responsible for mining the ore, in addition to the criminals in Tingen City who need to serve their sentences, there are also some Beyonders with lower sequences but very suitable for physical labor. It's considered a pretty good job. A job mining ore, with Beyonders applying. The benefits must be quite good. Sungwell ore, huh? Klein couldn't help but look at the ore lamp in the room that was no longer emitting light and heat. Indeed, compared to using oil lamps, coal, and gas, this kind of high efficiency and low cost thing is indeed a very good clean and efficient energy source. I'm leaving first. If you feel uncomfortable, tell the nurse. If you feel better, you can go out for a walk. Staying in the ward all the time isn't good. Pettigrew gave a few more instructions. He seemed to have something else to do, and soon got up and left the ward. Klein looked at the slightly gloomy sky outside the window. Today was a cloudy day with no sunlight, and the wind blowing into the room from outside the window carried a hint of coolness. It's going to rain, Klein muttered to himself. Then, he pondered the words he had just extracted from Pettigrew. According to Pettigrew's meaning, that thief should be mining now. Then, in my dream, the thief's corresponding symbol of pregnancy, what does this refer to? New life, bearing offspring, but with the problems of these few people, Klein really couldn't find the Nighthawks or the people from Tingen University or the Secret Order to help. Although I can attribute these things to dreams, this involves high-level matters that even the gray fog cannot block. I'm just a Sequence 9 seer. If I just dreamed it, that's one thing, but I clearly know who these people are. To be able to divine problems to this extent, it feels unlikely. But if those people are really marionettes, then are they from other seer pathway high-sequence members of the Secret Order? Or, are they high-sequence members of the seer pathway from the Secret University? Both are possible, and both cannot be ruled out. Of course, I can just take out the portraits without saying the results. But if I inform the Nighthawks or the people from Tingen University about this matter, it would be fine if it turned out to be other seer pathway high-sequence members of the Secret Order, but if it's a high-sequence member from the Secret University, then my secret might be exposed. Judging from the situation at the time, my divination was definitely noticed. Although it's unclear whether they vaguely sensed someone divining them, only having a concept, or whether they have already clearly identified some information about the diviner, just not knowing who it is, with a 50% probability, I'd better not gamble. Of the 36 stratagems, retreat is the best. I'll lie low first. However, investigating secretly shouldn't be too much of a problem, but don't do it recently, lest they suspect me. That patient in St. Peter's Hospital, I can find a chance to inquire about information, in a cautious way that won't be suspected. After determining the next course of action, Klein prepared to get a good night's sleep. He didn't sleep well all night yesterday. Dreaming in the morning shouldn't bring that kind of weird thing, after all, even if it's cloudy, at least it's daytime. Be gone, dirty things. But what you think about comes about. At noon, Klein, who had already taken a nap without dreaming, heard the family members of the patients at the next table discussing something while dining in the cafeteria of St. Peter's Hospital. They were holding newspapers with color pictures, seemingly commenting on something. Klein originally wasn't very interested. He inadvertently glanced at the newspapers that a few people were holding, but the hand holding his chopsticks paused, his pupils contracted, and his pupils dilated slightly. An out-of-control carriage trampling incident occurred on Golden Rose Street this morning, resulting in the deaths of 2 pedestrians. In the color picture, St. Peter's Hospital stretcher was carrying 2 corpses. The faces of the corpses were unexpectedly familiar to Klein. He had just seen them last night, the tenant and the passerby. They were silenced. This was Klein's first reaction. And his second reaction was, the mastermind realized that someone had noticed that these few were marionettes, and he wanted to destroy the marionettes and let them die normally. Not a high-sequence seer from the secret university, but from the secret order, or other organizations. Klein didn't even have time to finish the little bit of food left in his bowl. He had always been a very frugal and non-wasteful person, but this time Klein hurriedly picked up the metal plate, poured the food inside into the cafeteria's designated trash can, put away the plate, and immediately returned to the inpatient department. Following his memory, he took the elevator to the corresponding floor, calmed his mind a little, then walked out of the elevator and walked forward. When passing by a certain ward, he seemed to inadvertently glance inside. The bed in the room was covered with neatly arranged bedding. The room was empty. The patient in this ward was gone. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.